You'd think bathing in ancient times was a rare luxury. In Rome, it was mandatory, and it sucked. Public baths, no soap, oil mixed with sand, and when you thought you were getting cleaner, you were just marinating in a soup of sweat, urine, and old skin of 30 other men. But that was just the beginning. To even get to the bath, you had to pass through the palaestra, an open courtyard where naked men were wrestling, grunting, sweating, and sometimes peeing against the wall like it was no big deal. Welcome to a clean day in Rome. Now, close your eyes for a moment. You're an average Roman citizen. It's been 3 days since your last bath, and today the sun is burning like punishment from the gods. You grab your scratchy wool towel, the same one you've reused all week, and make your way to the nearest thermae. The atrium hits you first. The smell is thick, warm oil, damp stone, burnt charcoal, and too many bodies. The marble floors are slick with bathwater, and something else. The sound of sandals, squeaking voices, echoing skin, slapping laughter. You pass the depilation room. Someone's screaming. Wax again. Maybe too hot this time. You slip past a group of young soldiers lathering grease onto each other with bronze strigils, laughing, pushing, coughing. Then, finally, the caldarium, the hot room. Steam so thick you can barely see the wall. A man next to you coughs violently. You catch a glimpse of red spots on his back. You glance down at the bath. A thin, oily film dances on the surface. A long black hair floats beside it. Tiny bubbles pop near your feet. And you step in anyway. This was how you got clean in Rome. Bathing wasn't luxury. It was obligation, a performance, a power play. A place where people watched you, judged you, whispered behind your back, and sometimes killed. So now dim the lights, lower your screen, let your muscles soften. And if you're still here, maybe hit subscribe. Let me know what time it is, where you are, and whether you'd survive a Roman bathhouse. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine walking through the heart of ancient Rome. The roads are stone, but not the clean, polished kind you might picture from a postcard. No, these stones are worn and uneven, slick with a strange film that could be olive oil, horse urine, or both. Each step comes with a soft squelch and a faint stickiness. The air, it's hot, thick, and heavy. You can smell bodies before you see them. Sweat hangs like fog in alleyways, and if you breathe too deeply, there's a sharp, sour note like spoiled vinegar mixed with burning animal fat. That would be the kitchens, or possibly the drains. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it certainly wasn't cleaned every night. The rich, they lived in villas of polished marble. Fresh flowers, perfume, and imported incense tried their best to mask the human stink. Their floors were swept hourly by slaves, their garments freshly pressed, their hair oiled and styled to perfection. But just outside their courtyard walls, children played in dust-choked alleys. Vendors shouted over one another, sweating into their baskets of figs and dried fish. The ground was layered with grime, kicked up sand from the African wind, soot from braziers, crumbled bread, animal droppings, and the occasional smear of something less identifiable. There was no garbage service, no public sanitation team. You dumped what you didn't want out your window and hoped for the best. And the smells? Oh, the smells. Burnt bread, boiled cabbage, horse dung, cheap wine, body odor. Mixed together, every breath was a gamble. Some streets stank of old salve, used again and again until it turned bitter and slick. Others reeked of pickled fish sauce, garum poured liberally into every meal. The public latrines, you could smell them from 3 blocks away. Maybe 4 on a hot day. Rome was grand, yes, the architecture, the politics, the power. But it was also crowded, chaotic, and caked in dust. Beauty stood inches from rot. Statues gleamed white while gutters blackened. And somehow, this was called civilization. Let's keep walking, but breathe shallowly. The Forum is just ahead, and so is another stench you haven't met yet. You might think you know what clean means, but in ancient Rome, clean was something else entirely. It didn't mean bacteria-free, or even water-based. Clean to the Romans was a performance, a feeling, a fragrance. You weren't clean unless you smelled like wealth. Not water, not soap, but oils. Thick, heavy oils pressed from olives perfumed with herbs and stored in polished flasks that looked more like treasures than toiletries. Imagine stepping into a Roman atrium. the kind with mosaic floors and echoing marble columns. The man of the house greets you, skin glistening with a fresh coat of scented film of oil hair, combed back and lacquered with resin, his cheeks powdered with a hint of crushed pearl. He doesn't ask if you've washed, he asks what you're wearing, and by that, he means your oil. For Romans, oil wasn't just skincare. It was social currency. It said you had servants. It said you had status. It said someone else scraped the dirt from your back that morning while you stood arms outstretched like a marble god. Soap barbaric. Romans associated soap with the uncivilized tribes beyond the empire. The Gauls, the Germans, the people who scrubbed instead of anointed. To them, using soap was like trying to smooth a statue with a rock. Crude, unrefined, possibly harmful. Instead, they slathered ointment onto their bodies and scraped it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. Not because it worked better, but because it looked better. The ritual was half the point. And for the elite, clean meant more than just balm. It meant smooth skin, hairless, polished, unblemished. It meant scent trails that lingered in doorways. It meant no visible sweat, ever, no matter how hot the day or how long the toga. Ironically, this version of clean often made people dirtier. Oil-trapped grime. Strigils scratched skin. Perfumes masked rot. But no one said anything, because cleanliness wasn't about hygiene. It was about hierarchy, and in Rome, to be visibly clean was to be visibly powerful. You're walking down a Roman street, stone beneath your feet, dust in the air, a sharp mix of horse manure sweat and overripe olive oil lingers in your nose. Then suddenly, a different smell. Warm air, steam, rosemary maybe, and people laughing, arguing, humming tuneless songs. You've reached the thermae. Bathhouses were everywhere in Rome, over 900 just in the city alone. Big ones, tiny ones. Some open to the sky, others carved into hillsides with elaborate marble interiors. But no matter the design, they weren't just places to clean yourself. They were where Rome happened. Think of it like this. If the Forum was where Romans debated, the bathhouse was where they whispered. It was where politics were plotted, friendships formed, lovers met, deals struck. You didn't just go to bathe. You went to be seen, to hear things, to belong. Inside the space was segmented like a ritual. First the apoditarium, the changing room. You undress there, usually fully. Yes, completely. No towels, no stalls. Just benches and open eyes. Then the tepidarium, the warm room to relax your muscles. The caldarium, the hot room like a sauna, dripping with steam. And finally, the frigidarium, cold water, to shock your skin back to life. And yes, everyone shared these spaces. Senators, bakers, poets, prostitutes. Some bathhouses were divided by wealth. Others weren't. But regardless of status, you were naked, exposed, equalized. In a room so hot and loud, it didn't matter who you were, just how long you could stand the heat. You'd rub oil on your skin. A slave would rub it off. You'd talk with a man who might become your enemy tomorrow. You'd listen to gossip that might change your life by evening. Bathing wasn't private, it wasn't quiet, and it wasn't clean, not really. Buckets were reused, towels rarely washed. Steam rooms were humid breeding grounds for things that should never have names. And yet, people came. Every day. Not just to cleanse, but to exist in public as Romans. In a city that never stopped watching the bathhouse was your stage, and to skip it was to disappear. You want to be clean. In modern life, that's a given. A shower, some soap, a towel just for you. But in ancient Rome, cleanliness wasn't something you had. It was something you earned. Or more accurately, something your status allowed. Let's say you're poor. You live in an insula, a crowded apartment block with walls thin as parchment, and a staircase that smells like urine and onions. Your building doesn't have running water. Your room, too small for a basin. So how do you clean yourself? You save up a few coins to visit the local balneum, a smaller, dingier bathhouse than the Grand Thermae the wealthy visit. You wait in line. You share water towels, oil benches with strangers. And you keep your eyes low, especially if someone in silk robes walks in. Now let's say you're rich. You don't just visit bathhouses, you own one. Or better yet, you bathe at home. A personal slave heats your water. Another one pours oil across your back, scrapes it off with a gold-handled strigil. You have scented towels, maybe imported from Egypt. And afterwards, perfume. Clean tunic, soft sandals. You didn't earn this with hygiene. You earned it by birth. In Rome, hygiene was a performance, and only the elite got front row seats. Even inside public bathhouses, the hierarchy showed. Slaves did the dirty work. They carried the bucket, scrubbed the floors, shaved your body. They weren't allowed in the hot pools just near them. They weren't there to bathe. They were there to help you bathe, and they were everywhere, silent, efficient, invisible. You sat on marble benches. They squatted on stone floors. You soaked in oil. They scrubbed the blood from your back after a strigil slipped. If you were clumsy or cruel, you might strike them with the same tool. Cleanliness in Rome came at someone else's expense, and if you were truly poor, you sometimes skipped bathing altogether. It wasn't shameful, it was expected. Just, don't let anyone smell you. Because being dirty wasn't just uncomfortable. It was social death. You'd be judged, mocked, avoided, not because people were worried about germs. They didn't know germs existed. They just knew if you stink, you're nobody. No loofahs, no soap bars, no soft towels. In ancient Rome, cleaning your body meant reaching for a set of tools that would make a modern spa-goer cringe. First up, the strigil. Imagine a curved, dull metal blade, almost like a flattened spoon with an edge. This was the Roman version of a loofah. Slaves would pour warm oil over your skin, then scour it off with the strigil, taking with it sweat, dirt, and whatever else had built up that day. It didn't feel like a massage. It felt like being peeled slowly, firmly, and publicly. The sensation a mix of raw, ticklish, and painful. And the oil, it wasn't fragrant lavender from Provence. Often it was reused, mixed with the grime of others before you, and heated over coals that filled the room with smoke. Then there was the tersorium. This one's hard to explain without making your stomach turn. Let's just say it was Rome's answer to toilet paper. A sea sponge tied to a stick, used communally, dipped in a jar of vinegar water after each use, supposedly cleaned, stored beside the public latrine, and yes, reused again and again. If you were lucky, someone had the decency to replace the vinegar once a week. If you were really lucky, you didn't drop it. That was just the beginning. Roman bathers also used abrasive powders made from crushed pumice, volcanic ash, or even ground shells. These were meant to exfoliate the skin. In practice, they left tiny cuts, red lines, running across arms, backs, even faces. Some thought it was a sign of purity. Most just hoped the wounds wouldn't fester. And for washing, no personal basins. Just shared buckets filled from the same bathwater used by dozens before you. Sometimes warm, sometimes tepid, almost never fresh. You scooped with your hands, or used a communal ladle. If it slipped into the bucket, someone else would fish it out and keep using it. And then the towels. Thin linen squares, passed from person to person, rarely washed, sometimes just dried in the sun and folded again. So yes, the Romans bathed. But not like you think. They scraped instead of scrubbed. They shared what should have been private. And they believed that pain and ritual were signs of refinement. To be clean in Rome was to accept tools that cut, to smile as oil dripped down your back, to pretend that sharing a sponge was civilized, and most of all, to never ever ask where that bucket water came from. Soap to the Romans was for barbarians, literally. In their minds, the tribes to the north, the Celts, the Gauls, the Germans, lathered up with animal fats and ash like uncultured savages. Real Romans didn't wash like that. They anointed. And so olive oil became their magic potion. Not just any oil. It had to be pressed, infused with herbs, and warmed to the right temperature. Slaves would rub it into your skin until you shimmered like a freshly waxed statue. Then scrape it all off with a strigil. No bubbles, no foam, no rinsing. Just sweat dust and oil blending together into a thick, slick film. And then swiped off in long, deliberate strokes. Your skin was supposed to feel smooth. Instead, it often felt greasy. But that was the point. In Roman culture, clean didn't mean sterilized. It meant luxurious. Olive oil was expensive. If you could afford it, you were clearly someone of class. Soap, that was crude, undignified. The cleaning method of people who had no slaves, no heated rooms, and no scented oils. In fact, many Roman writers looked down on soap. Some even mocked those who used it, calling it rude lather or foreign slime. Seneca once wrote that using soap stripped the soul as well as the skin. Though it's worth noting, he died from forced suicide, so perhaps not the best hygiene advisor. Doctors of the time even claimed that oil was good for your health, that it opened the pores, released toxins, and let the bad humors escape. Never mind the bacteria trapped inside those pores. Germs as a concept didn't exist. People itched. People developed boils, rashes, and red flaky skin. They called it heat rash or bad blood. They didn't consider that they were simply dirty. But no one said it out loud, because cleanliness was performance. To skip your oil bath was to say, I'm poor. To reach for soap, even if it worked better, was to say, I'm foreign. So people oiled. Daily if they could, twice daily if they were showing off. And when their skin stung from strigil scrapes, or their sweat mixed with perfume to form a new kind of stink. They smiled, they powdered their faces, and they whispered that they were clean. Not. Because in Rome, the worst thing you could smell like was truth. The Romans didn't bathe just to be clean. They bathed to belong, to be seen reclining with the right people, wearing the right oil, listening to the right gossip echo off marble. Bathing wasn't about removing dirt. It was about performing cleanliness in a way that others could see and smell. To skip your daily visit to the baths wasn't just considered lazy. It was suspicious. A man who didn't bathe might be hiding something. A woman who skipped a day might be judged as unkempt or worse, unworthy. Children were taught early that to be clean was to be loved, that the smell of old sweat was a kind of moral failure. In Rome, bodies weren't scrubbed in solitude. They were polished in public. Even the order of bathing mattered. You started with a warm room, then a hotter one. Then maybe a steam bath or a cold plunge, depending on your social circle. A senator might bathe not for the heat, but because his rivals did. And to miss a day was to miss whispers in the steam. You didn't just show up. You performed your presence. The oil you brought, the strigil you used, the body you bared, each told a story about your wealth, your status, and your place in the world. And if you didn't fit the scene rejected you. Silent bathers were odd. Too quick, a rinse cheap. No oil poor. Too much oil arrogant. It was a balancing act of appearances under a roof that smelled of rosemary sweat and politics. You might think cleanliness was a virtue, but in Rome, it was a requirement, a performance you were expected to perfect every single day. Because in Rome, being clean wasn't just about your body, it was about your reputation. And sometimes that was the dirtiest game of all. You're standing at the entrance now. The building is grand, sure. Arched ceilings, marble columns, statues of gods you half recognize. But the moment the door swings open, all of that fades. What hits you first is the smell. It's not one smell, it's a collision of them. Hot oil, old sweat, burnt herbs, damp stone, and something else. Something meaty, almost sweet, like decay, wrapped in lavender. You take a step inside. The floor is slick, not with water but with a mysterious mix of oil dust, stray hairs, and other people's decisions. The crowd is impossible to avoid. Shoulders brush against yours, bodies pressed by oiled steaming, some still streaked with dirt from the street. And no one seems to care. You try to find a quiet corner. There isn't one. The bathhouse is alive, with shouting, laughing, arguing, splashing. It sounds like a marketplace except everyone's nearly naked. The air is thick, hot, wet. It clings to your skin like a second layer. You're sweating before you even undress. Speaking of which, you realize you're overdressed. Men are stripping right in front of you. Some casually, some proudly. There's no shame here. But for you, every movement feels exposed. Your sandals make a slapping sound on the stone floor. Your feet are already grimy. The stone is warm from the bodies, slippery with oil and gods know what. You pass a pile of towels. They look used. One has a reddish stain. Another a smear of something green. You keep walking. Around you, conversations blur into a single constant hum. Someone's talking politics. Someone else is offering to pluck your armpits. Another man is loudly recommending his favorite strigil vendor. You just wanted to get clean. But this is immersion therapy in a city's bloodstream. No privacy, no quiet, no boundaries. And you haven't even gotten to the water yet. Someone bumps into you hard. They mutter something half apology, half insult. A drop of their sweat lands on your collarbone. Welcome to the Roman bathhouse, where hygiene isn't a routine. It's a chaotic ritual. And this is just the beginning. There are no curtains, no cubicles, no doors to gently close behind you while you undress. Just a long stone bench, a handful of wooden pegs, and 50 strangers in various stages of undress. You hesitate. That's your first mistake. Because now, people are noticing. Not out of malice, this is just Rome, but hesitation makes you stand out. A boy, no older than 12, flashes you a grin. First time he asks with the kind of confidence only someone born into this chaos can have. You give a weak smile and start removing your tunic. It clings to your back, damp already from the humid air. You tug it off, and suddenly, you feel it air on your bare skin, eyes on your spine, and the unmistakable sense of being seen. You try not to make eye contact. To your left, an old man with a belly like a spilled amphora, humming as he oils his chest. To your right, a soldier with scars running down his thighs, scrubbing his feet with a sharp-looking brush. Behind you, more people than you want to count moving, sweating, watching, or worse, not watching at all, as if you don't matter. Which is somehow even worse. There's no towel, no robe, nothing to wrap around your waist and protect a sliver of dignity. Your clothes go in a communal basket. You hope they'll still be there when you're done. You really hope no rats find them first. The floor is cold under your bare feet, but not clean. Your soles pick up grit oil, maybe sand, definitely someone else's hair. You feel your spine tighten. You're trying not to flinch, not to hunch your shoulders, not to cover yourself. Because in Rome, being modest makes you weird. And being weird makes you a target. There's no locker room talk here. Because there's no locker room, everything is out in the open. And you're not just a participant, you're part of the show. A man near the entrance is telling a story about how he met a senator in this very bath last week. A woman across the way, one of the rare female bathers, probably from a wealthier household, is laughing too loudly at something no one else heard. And you're just trying to remember how to breathe. Someone pats you on the back. Their hand is wet. Relax, they say. You'll get used to it. You nod. But you won't. Not today. You sit down on a low marble bench slick with oil and sweat. You don't know whose. You don't ask. A man approaches. He's shirtless, wiry, with a leather strap across his chest to hold the tools of his trade. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't have to. He's a slave. And you're here to be cleaned. In his hand is a strigil, a curved blade, dull but sturdy. It looks like a metal crescent moon, but not romantic. Practical, cold, sharp enough to scrub, not to cut. Lean forward, he says flatly. You obey. The first stroke makes you jump. It's not gentle. It's not supposed to be. He drags the strigil from the base of your neck to the small of your back, scraping off the olive oil that was rubbed into your skin earlier, along with dirt, sweat, dead skin, maybe more. You feel each pull like a rasp across raw wood. You are the wood. There is no conversation, only the wet, sticky sound of the blade, and the occasional grunt as he pushes harder around your shoulders. It stings. It burns. You feel a line of fire each time the strigil travels your spine. A second slave catches the runoff in a bowl. He dumps it to the side, a small pile of grayish sludge, glistening under the bathhouse torchlight. You want to look away, but you can't, because that was you. The man works quickly. Your arms, your legs, even your neck. At one point, the strigil skims too close to a mole. You flinch. He doesn't notice. Or maybe he does, and just doesn't care. You're not the only one here. 10 feet away, another man is being scraped. He's bleeding slightly. No one reacts, because this is how it's done. There's no soap, no warm water, no gentle loofah or foamy lather. Just a metal tool and someone who's been trained to use it with just enough force to keep you quiet. Behind you, the line grows. People waiting to take your place, to feel the same burn, to leave a part of themselves on the floor of this building in hopes of looking cleaner than they feel. When he's done, the slave gives a brief nod. Not to you, to the next man behind you. You are dismissed, and as you stand, your back sticky and sore, you realize you're not cleaner. You're shaved raw, scraped, exposed, and there's still more to go. You think the scraping was the worst of it. But no, that was just the appetizer. Now comes the cleaning. There is no basin of water waiting. No tub, no bucket, no steam rising in a cloud of comfort. Instead, a small jar of olive oil is handed to you. Warm, greasy, thick like syrup in the heat. You're told to rub it all over. Arms, legs, neck, even between your toes. Yes, there too. The oil glistens on your skin, catching the bathhouse light. You feel like a roast before the fire, or worse, a salad. Everyone is glistening. Everyone is oiled. It's not sensual. It's not relaxing. It's required. A man next to you slaps his chest, rubbing the oil in with practiced hands, grinning at you with a mouth missing 2 teeth. First time he asks, you nod. He laughs. You'll get used to it, or you won't. You look down. Your body is slick, and yet you feel dirtier, not cleaner, like you've coated your sweat in something that only makes it stick. A young boy runs by his foot, slipping slightly on the stone floor. His shoulder bumps yours. His skin leaves behind a trail of warm oil across your ribs. You gag a little. He doesn't notice. You try to rub faster, harder, as if speed could restore a sense of control. But the oil just spreads. It never soaks in. It never ends. Then comes the dust. The floor is not clean. Nothing in here is. And the moment you kneel to rub your legs or adjust your sandal, your knees pick up a film of ash-tiny hairs, and God knows what else. So now you are oily and dusty, sweaty and scraped. Your skin smells like a mix of warm olives and the breath of 50 strangers. You stand up too fast, dizzy from the heat and the stench. A slave offers a cloth. You reach for it. It's damp. Not from water. From someone else's hands, or back, or armpit. You wipe your face anyway. You don't have a choice. This is Rome. This is clean. And if you complain, they'll say you're soft, uncivilized, barbarian. So you smile. Pretend this is normal. Because here cleanliness isn't about hygiene. It's about fitting in. And in this world, everyone's playing the same dirty, oily game. You've made it through the oil. Barely. You're slick, overheated, and slightly nauseated. But you're not done yet, because now comes the tools. And Rome loves its tools. Except they're not yours. They're everyone's. First the bucket. It's filled with water, kind of. Mostly backwash old oil and something floating that might be a leaf. Or not. You're handed a ladle. You stare. There are no individual basins, no faucets. You scoop water from the shared bucket. Pour it on your arm. It slides right off, mixing with the grime you were hoping to remove. Next comes the cloth. Someone tosses you one. It's damp. It's warm. And it smells like everyone else. You don't know whose armpit it last touched. You don't ask. You just wipe. There's a man beside you using a towel to dry between his toes. Then he hangs it on a hook. You watch another man walk by and pick it up. For his face. No one blinks. But the real horror that comes last. You approach the tersorium, a sponge on a stick, resting in a shallow jar of vinegar and water. It's the ancient Roman version of toilet paper. And it is communal, used for wiping, back there, then dipped back in the same vinegar jar, and left for the next person. You freeze. Surely not, you think. But yes, that is the system. A man exits the latrine, nods politely, and gestures for you to go in. He just used it. The tersorium is still dripping. The vinegar is not enough. Not by modern standards, not by any standards, but this is Rome's pinnacle of hygiene. A sponge soaked in a weak acid shared among dozens. No gloves, no sanitation, just a stick, a jar, and trust. You don't want to use it, but you have to, because in this world it's either join in or be considered filthy. And the irony is hard to ignore. You came here to be clean, but every step has made you dirtier than when you arrived. The oil, the sweat, the shared towels, the sponge. This isn't a bathhouse. It's a masquerade, and everyone's pretending they don't smell what you smell. You look at the sponge, you take a breath, you reach, and silently you mourn the invention of toilet paper still 800 years in the future. You want to just get in scrub, off the day, and get out. But that's not how Roman bathing works. This isn't a solo routine, it's a show. The moment you stepped into the bathhouse, you became part of a performance, a sweating, steaming, slippery ballet of bodies, each trying to prove something. Because bathing in Rome isn't about hygiene. It's about status, charm, power. You glance around. A man is laughing a little too loud. His chest gleams with oil, his strigal movements exaggerated for anyone watching. Nearby, 2 senators whisper over the steam, debating politics, probably deciding someone's fate. A woman walks past. She's older, draped in silk, flanked by servants carrying jars of imported oils. She doesn't bathe, she hosts. A young man strikes up a conversation. About theater, about gladiators, about your body, actually. You nod awkwardly, unsure if he's flirting or mocking. You move to a quieter corner. A mistake. Someone notices your silence, your lack of interaction. And that, in Rome, is suspicious. If you're quiet, you might be plotting, or judging, or worse, too poor to be interesting. You try to smile. Someone throws you a joke. You force a laugh. It feels like a party you weren't invited to, but still had to bring a gift for. You wipe your arms with another reused towel. You pretend not to see the man next to you scratching at a rash. You engage in small talk you don't care about. Because here, silence is a red flag. To bathe in Rome is to participate, to mingle, to laugh at dirty jokes, to gossip about people you've never met, to be seen, and to pretend you're enjoying it, even if the oil burns, even if your skin stings, even if the room smells like old feet and fresh disappointment. You came here to be clean. But now you're performing cleanliness, and if you don't play along, they'll notice. They always notice. In Rome, the dirtiest thing you can be is unlikable. And being clean, that's not about soap or water or hygiene. It's about proving you belong. And just when you think the worst is over, that the shouting, the crowd, the shared buckets have wrung the last drop of discomfort from you, someone brings out the blade. Because in Rome, to be clean wasn't just about oil and steam. It meant being hairless, perfectly painfully smooth. But being clean wasn't just about stepping into the bath. It was personal, intimate, sometimes painful. Because in Rome, every inch of your body had to prove you belonged. You think about your legs, not because they're hairy, but because in Rome, hair means dirt. Hair means barbarian. And today, you're not allowed to be either. You sit on a low bench. A slave kneels beside you, holding a dull, curved blade, not unlike the one used to peel fruit. Only this one is for your thighs. No soap, no shaving cream, no mercy. They start with your legs. A quick scratching. You flinch. They don't pause. Then your arms, your chest, You try not to think about it. The metal is cold, then hot from friction. Each pull lifts more than hair, it lifts skin. Tiny nicks become red lines become welts. There is no disinfectant, only oil. Someone once said oil soothes the skin. That person probably wasn't bleeding. Across the room, a wealthier man reclines, his body gleaming and utterly hairless. His skin is pristine, unmarred by even a shadow of fuzz. He looks powerful, untouchable. You wonder how many slaves it took to make him that smooth. How many wounds were hidden beneath the shine? Back to you. Your slave is now using a pumice stone, a rock, on your skin. You gasp. Pain is part of the purification, someone says. Purification. You look down. Your thighs are raw, red, slick. You're pure now. And utterly vulnerable. The bleeding stops eventually. Kind of. But the burning doesn't. You think about infection. You think about the tiny cuts. You think about how one of them might just decide to kill you in 3 days. You don't even get a bandage. Just a towel that smells like the last 10 people who used it. You limp out of the chamber, clean by Roman standards, but bruised in ways that will bloom by morning. And still, you hear a voice whisper, you missed a patch. There's a copper basin in the corner of the bathhouse. You wouldn't notice it at first. It's not gilded or ornate. Just a wide, shallow bowl sitting on a slab of stone, surrounded by a few discarded towels and sandals. But if you ask someone where to clean your hands, that's where they'll point. And so you walk over, slowly, hoping somehow that it might be fresh. It isn't. The water is murky. A cloudy, lukewarm broth of yesterday's sweat, today's foot dirt, and olive oil that's already been used once or twice too many times. It smells faintly metallic, a little like rust, a little like spoiled herbs. Someone's thrown in a handful of mint leaves to disguise the staleness, but it only makes the contrast worse. There's no soap, of course. That would be barbaric. Roman hands are purified with water and willpower, maybe a quick rub of a perfumed cloth afterward, if you're wealthy. But for now, you're standing in line, behind a man with cracked knuckles and a woman who just wiped oil off her child's feet. The man plunges his hands in and gives them a lazy swirl. The child kicks the water. You watch tiny ripples dance across the surface, along with a floating speck of something you hope is just a petal. Now it's your turn. You crouch, your knees brush the damp ground, and as you lower your fingers, your brain hesitates, your body doesn't. Because the worst thing you could do here isn't to be unclean. It's to seem unwilling. So you dip your hands into the tepid pool. It clings, slightly thick, not quite water anymore. You try not to look too closely, but you do. There's a film across the top, a bit of hair stuck to the rim, something brown. You hope desperately it's clay. You rub your palms together, pretending it helps, pretending the water is doing something good. But all it does is slide across your skin like used lotion. And then as you're about to dry off, a young man reaches past you. He has a small cloth. He dips it into the basin and wrings it out over his face. The water runs down his cheeks. He sighs, content. And you wonder, how many faces have been touched by that same basin? How many feet, how many rashes, how many secret wounds the Romans may not have known about germs? But surely, they must have known about disgust. You wipe your hands on the side of your tunic, hoping nobody sees. But someone does. They smile, because that's what everyone does. And so you smile too, and move on. The Roman smile, white, confident, regal. It was a statement, not just of beauty, but of status, of grooming, of being above the dirt and decay of the common crowd. But behind that polished grin was something far less elegant. You wake early, before the bathhouse opens, before the slaves heat the water. Your mouth feels dry, your breath stale. You reach for your cleansing kit, a small wooden box, polished and carved with your initials, if you're lucky. Inside a rag, a stick, and a small clay vial. The vial smells sharp. You already know what's inside. Everyone does. Urine. Specifically goat urine. Aged, fermented. Ammonia-rich and yellow just enough to do the job. It's not a secret. It's not even shameful. It's medicine. It's science, Roman science. And it's how people like you keep their teeth white and breath tolerable. You unscrew the lid. A sour, pungent scent wafts out, prickling your eyes, curling your nose hairs. You breathe through your mouth instead. Carefully, you dip the cloth in and wrap it around your finger. And then, you scrub. Front teeth first, gentle circles. Then deeper molars, gums, the back of your tongue. The taste hits you somewhere between rotten lemons and burnt hay. But worse than the taste is the idea. You try not to think about the goat, or the bucket, or who collected it, or where it sat overnight, or how many mouths that same vial has served this month. But the ammonia works. It whitens. It strips. It scalds. And maybe that's the point. You spit into the corner of the courtyard. It sizzles slightly on the stone. You rinse with a splash of water from the communal jug, barely enough to clean off the burn. And just like that, you're presentable. Your teeth gleam like marble tiles. But your mouth aches, your gums sting, and beneath the surface, tiny microtears are forming openings for infection, for decay, for the very things this ritual is supposed to prevent. You look into a polished bronze mirror. You smile. And you wonder, not for the first time, why being clean always has to feel so dirty. But you'll do it again tomorrow. Because in Rome, yellow teeth are barbaric, and your mouth, as strange as it seems, is your reputation. And besides, it's better than smelling like the rest of the city. So you rinse your rag, you cap the vial, you press your lips together to hold in the taste, and you smile. Because everyone else is smiling too. You thought exfoliating was a modern indulgence. A trip to the spa, a gentle scrub, maybe a bit of sea salt and lavender. Not in Rome. In ancient Rome, to exfoliate meant to scrape. And scrape, and scrape. They didn't have sugar scrubs. They had ash. They didn't have microbeads. They had sand. They didn't have loofahs. They had crushed oyster shells. Powdered limestone was a favorite. So was pumice, ground into fine grit and rubbed vigorously into the skin until it turned pink, or red, or raw. This wasn't self-care. It was abrasion disguised as beauty. People would bleed. Small scratches dotted their arms and backs. The idea was simple: remove the top layer of skin to reveal the freshness beneath. But in a world without antibiotics, that freshness often became infection. Tiny wounds invited bacteria. Redness became swelling. Swelling turned to pus. Still, they believed they were cleaner for it. There was even a ritualistic element. Brides might scrub before their wedding day, gladiators before a match, wealthy men before banquets. It wasn't just about feeling smooth. It was about appearing polished, literally. The skin, they said, should shine like marble. But marble doesn't bleed. And perhaps the most haunting part, this wasn't the worst part of their routine. You're already sore. Your skin feels like it's been sandpapered. But the Roman idea of beauty didn't stop at glowing skin. It reached deeper into your hair, your nails, your smell, even your teeth. The next steps in your hygiene journey weren't just uncomfortable. They were dangerous. Let's keep going. You hear the clink of metal behind you. It's not armor, it's not a weapon. It's your slave approaching with a knife. Not for defense, not for cooking, for your fingers. In Rome, having clean hands wasn't just polite. It was expected, especially if you belonged to the upper class. Dirty nails meant a dirty soul. But instead of nail clippers or emery boards, Romans relied on sharpened blades. Slaves were trained to trim nails with surgical precision using tiny knives. One wrong slip, and you didn't lose just a hangnail. You lost blood, sometimes skin. Calluses scraped off, dead skin peeled away with metal. Fingertips left tender, sometimes raw. There were no antiseptics, no gloves, no understanding of bacteria. Just a piece of cloth to wipe away the red. The process was expected to be done quietly, without flinching. If you winced, you were weak. If the slave slipped, they were punished. Sometimes harshly, sometimes immediately. Manicures were for status, pedicures too. It wasn't about relaxation. It was about power. To have someone kneel and cut your nails, for you to file your heel with a knife while you lounged, that was the mark of refinement. And of course, those same knives were used on dozens of others. Rarely cleaned, never sterilized. A shared instrument passed from foot to foot, hand to hand. One infection was enough to lose a toe. A few were enough to lose a life. But, again, this wasn't the worst of it. You survived the knife. Now it's time to smell acceptable. In ancient Rome, body odor wasn't just a hygiene issue. It was a social verdict. Smell pleasant, and you were seen as noble. Smell human, and you risked being seen as uncivilized, even dangerous. But deodorant, as you know, it didn't exist. No sprays, no roll-ons, no pH balanced for anyone. Instead, Romans turned to chemistry. Primitive, beautiful, deadly. They crushed white lead into a fine powder. They mixed it with oils, clays, sometimes flower petals, and they smeared it under their arms, behind their knees, around their necks. Anywhere sweat might betray them. At first, it masked the scent. For an hour, maybe two. But the lead didn't stop there. It entered the pores. It seeped into the bloodstream. And slowly, silently, it began to kill. Some Romans developed strange rashes. Others lost their hair. A few complained of headaches, memory loss, or sudden mood swings. They didn't know it was the lead. How could they? To them, the sweet smell meant they were clean, desirable, civilized. Some even wore sachets of scented earth, little bags of perfumed dirt tucked into their robes. Others went further, layering ambergris ground flowers, even animal fat infused with myrrh. The rich competed to smell the most floral. The poor tried to imitate with whatever herbs they could find. But no matter how pleasant the scent, the skin beneath it told the truth. It stung, it itched, it bled, and still they smiled. Because better to suffer beneath perfume than to be labeled dirty. But what about the top of your head? Surely if your skin was scrubbed and your scent carefully engineered, your hair must be clean too. Right? Well, let's talk about lice. Your head itches. Again and again. You reach up, trying not to scratch, because scratching means suspicion. If others see you scratching, they'll assume. And if they assume you're unclean, which is worse than just having lice. It's shame. In ancient Rome, having clean hair was a paradox. You could either shave your head entirely smooth and shiny, like a well-scrubbed marble statue, or you could keep your hair, and risk becoming a home for creatures no one dared name aloud. Many Roman men chose the former. Baldness was practical. It was clean. It showed you didn't have time for vanity, just oil and discipline. But for women, and some men of status, long hair meant beauty. And beauty meant maintenance. And maintenance meant bugs. There were no shampoos, no scented conditioners, No citrus rinses or silky serums. Instead, there were lice combs carved from bone or wood, and oil, thick and sticky, meant to trap the parasites. But the oil also trapped dust sweat and whatever floated in the air that day. Lice thrived in it, especially in crowded homes, warm bathhouses, and among shared combs passed from slave to slave. You'd sit in a courtyard, sunlight glaring down while someone combed your scalp, slowly, methodically, and not always gently. The process hurt. It had to, because if you weren't yelping, they weren't being thorough. And even then, you were never quite sure if the bugs were gone, or just hiding for now. Some tried herbal rinses, rosemary, mint, vinegar. Others used ashes mixed with olive oil. A few just poured more perfume on and hoped for the best. But lice weren't the only threat. Fleas, mites, even ticks, sometimes especially in homes with pets or livestock. Hair in Rome was a playground for tiny invaders. And then there were wigs. Elaborate curled powdered wigs, often made from other people's hair. Especially blonde hair imported from Germania. These wigs were rarely cleaned, never boiled, and always shared among the wealthy. Meaning, lice didn't just stay in poor neighborhoods. They traveled on your scalp, in your status. So when you see that perfectly styled Roman noble in a marble bust head full of luscious curls, imagine what's hiding inside. It's not just ambition. It's not just secrets. It's movement. Tiny, itchy, eternal. And if bugs weren't enough, some Romans went even further, turning their hair into fiery statements of beauty, with ingredients that burned more than just their image. Your scalp is already sensitive, still stinging from yesterday's lice combing, but today, you're trying something new, something fashionable, something red. In Rome, beauty trends weren't just about cleanliness, they were about transformation. And nothing transformed a person like hair dyed in vivid colors. Among the upper class, red hair became a mark of allure, especially for women. It was exotic, eye-catching, and just rare enough to spark envy, so they made it less rare with concoctions that would make your skin crawl. Literally, the most popular dye for that brilliant Roman Red Bull's blood, mixed with rust and clay. Some recipes added beechwood ashes, others a touch of vinegar, or even fermented leeks. It wasn't chemistry, it was alchemy, and pain. You'd kneel in a stone room while a slave massaged the warm, iron-scented mixture into your hair. It burned, not like fire, worse, a slow, creeping sting that tightened your scalp and made your eyes water. You weren't allowed to flinch. Flinching meant weakness. They'd wrap your head in cloth, leave you to set under the heat of the midday sun, and wait, and wait, and wait. Hours passed, and you could feel your skin tighten, your pores scream. Some developed rashes. Others lost patches of hair entirely. One woman, a senator's wife, reportedly fainted and vomited from the fumes. She woke up bald, but she was praised for her bravery. After unwrapping, the dye was rinsed off with lukewarm water, usually reused from someone else's bath. Your scalp, now raw, revealed hair that was sometimes red, and sometimes a muddy, smudged brown. But still, you were applauded. You had suffered for your beauty. And sometimes the red wasn't enough. Some added crushed beetles for deeper color. Others rubbed in oil mixed with ashes to seal the hue. The scent, a blend of wrought iron and desperation. This wasn't salon-style pampering. It was chemical warfare. On yourself. And for those who couldn't afford the process, there were wigs, red, curly, dramatic, often dyed the same way, with the same pain, just transferred from one scalp to another. So the next time you see a Roman mosaic of a smiling woman with flaming hair, don't imagine admiration. Imagine the sting, the tears, the permanent damage beneath the dye. Because in Rome, vanity didn't come with a mirror. It came with blood. And if their dyes didn't cleanse the body or the spirit, maybe the sun could. Or so they believed. They didn't have soap. They didn't have microscopes. But what the Romans did have was sunlight. And in a world where heat was considered cleansing, the sun became their purifier of choice. You're standing in the middle of a courtyard, stone walls around you, a square of sky above. The air is dry. The floor is warm under your feet, like a baking tray left too long in the oven. And you're completely naked. This isn't punishment. It's hygiene. A man nearby is spreading his arms wide, tilting his face toward the sky. His skin glistens not from water, but from olive oil he smeared earlier. He closes his eyes, like he's in prayer. And in a way, he is. The belief the sun burned away impurity. Sweat, good. That meant it was working. Searing skin, even better. The more it stung, the deeper the cleanse. Children were especially vulnerable, and therefore especially exposed. You watch a young boy, perhaps 6, shuffled by a slave into the center of the courtyard. He winces under the sun, squinting as his thin body is stripped down and laid onto a scorching stone slab. It's said to build strength, but you see the fear in his face. You remember being that child. There's no shade, no water, just oil, heat, and hope. Hope that the sweat pouring down your temples is carrying sickness with it. Hope that the burning on your shoulders is killing unseen rot. Hope that this moment of pain equals purity. But the sun doesn't discriminate. It doesn't know myth from medicine. By the time the session ends, usually marked by dizziness or a fainting child, your skin is red and raw. Some faint, some vomit. A few are quietly carried away to lie down. You glance down at your arms. The sheen of oil has thickened with dust. You don't feel clean. You feel cooked. And yet, this was praised. A solar cleansing. A ritual of resilience. A cultural exfoliation. And if you didn't participate, you were unhygienic, superstitious, un-Roman. You think that's as odd as it gets until someone hands you a paste made of amber animal fat and sap, and tells you to rub it under your arms. It's not perfume. Not really. At least not the kind that comes in pretty glass bottles or makes you think of flowers. What you're holding is thick, sticky, almost yellow. It smells, how do you describe it? Like crushed leaves left too long in the sun. Like animal grease with a hint of something sweet and something dead. They call it unctorium, a fragrant paste used by those who could afford to hide what they truly smelled like. And now, someone is gesturing for you to smear it under your arms. Not a dab, not a sprinkle, a full hand scoop. You do as you're told. Because if you don't, if you let your natural odor linger, you risk being judged. Not just as dirty, but as uncivilized. So you begin. The paste is warm from the sun. It clings to your skin, dragging with resistance as you rub. Your fingers slide over your armpit hair, slick with oil and sweat. It feels like applying honey over rot. The smell was strong, not pleasant, just strong enough to replace the scent of unwashed bodies, of days-old oil of the bathhouse you just exited. You move onto your chest, your neck, behind your ears. Each touch leaves a glossy sheen. You are now clean by Roman standards. Scented, shiny, presentable, and yet you feel none of those things. The paste begins to melt in the heat. It drips. It stains your tunic. It gets into your mouth when you scratch your lip. No one else looks uncomfortable. The man next to you is even applying a second layer, bragging that it contains imported ambergris. The woman across the courtyard fans herself proudly, her neck shining like marble. It's a performance, an olfactory illusion, and everyone is playing along. You're no longer trying to smell good. You're trying not to smell at all, and beneath the heavy paste, your skin can't breathe. Your sweat has nowhere to go. Bacteria love it. They thrive. But you won't know that, not until the boils start, not until the rashes bloom under the perfume. And by then, well, you'll just cover them up with more paste. And while you're still sticky, still reeking of amber and sweat, someone hands you a thin metal rod and says, "Don't forget to clean your ears." The tool is thin. Almost elegant in a way, a narrow rod maybe 6 inches long, tapered to a fine point. It might be bone or bronze. No one really tells you. They just hand it to you like it's obvious, like you should know what to do. You're still slick with perfume paste, your skin catching the late afternoon light when you're told, gently but firmly, it's time to clean inside. Inside, what? Your nostrils, your ears, the places no one talks about, but everyone notices. You raise the rod uncertain and bring it to your ear. There's no cotton, no padding, just cold metal against warm skin. The first drag across is cautious. You twist slowly, trying to mimic what you've seen others do. A dry tickle runs down your jaw. You try not to cough, then deeper, too deep. A jab of pain shoots into your skull. You wince. Someone laughs. It's your first time, isn't it? You don't answer. You just pull the rod out. There's something on it, thick, yellowish. You don't want to look. You're supposed to wipe it on your tunic, or your arm, or if you're fancy, a cloth. You don't have a cloth. And now the nose. This time you know better. You angle the rod gently, slide it in just enough to clear a corner. It makes your eyes water. The smell hits you immediately, not from the rod, but from yourself. From days, weeks, months of never really being clean. There is no soap, no antiseptic, no boiling water. You use the same tool someone else used an hour ago. Maybe the same one they used for both ends. No one washes them. They dry in the sun, maybe. Or they stay damp tucked in a shared box, passed down through the bathhouse. You start to understand why people here don't smile much. Not with their mouths, not with their eyes. Because the body is not private, and neither is its filth. You finish your ritual. Your ears throb faintly. Your nose feels raw. But you say nothing. You pretend it feels good. Because here pain is part of shine. Discomfort is the price of acceptance. You hand the rod back. It's still warm. And just when you think it's over, when you've scraped, smeared, and scrubbed every inch of your body, someone holds up a bowl of white powder and says, "Now we make you look clean." The powder looks innocent, white, soft, almost like flour, but it clings to the fingers like ash. You're told it's for your face, then your chest, your neck, even under your arms, anywhere the sun might touch and make you look less Roman, because to be tanned is to be common, to be brown is to be labor, to be pale, that's power, prestige, purity. The woman holding the bowl, her arms, bare her chin, held high, dips a cloth into the mixture. She pats it gently onto your cheek. It stings, not immediately. But soon, you can feel the powder finding every tiny scrape left by the strigil. It settles into your pores like dust into cracked marble. And you start to itch. But you're not supposed to scratch. That would ruin the finish. The powder isn't just chalk, it's crushed lead, gypsum, even powdered marble if you're wealthy enough, all ground to dust, all toxic in time. But no one talks about that. They talk about how smooth you look, how radiant, how your skin almost glows in the dim light of the bathhouse. Never mind the headaches that follow, the strange numbness in your fingertips, the peeling skin that comes days later as if your body is quietly trying to escape itself. You see others older bathers whose faces seem locked in a kind of waxy stillness, their eyes dull, their hair thin, but their skin still pale, still beautiful, still clean. And isn't that the point? Not health, not comfort, not even truth. Just the appearance of cleanliness, the illusion of it, even if the cost is invisible, even if it slowly unthreads your nerves, poisons your blood, and hollows your bones. You feel the powder settle. You don't move. You try to breathe only through your mouth, because to breathe too deeply might pull it into your lungs, and you're not sure what it does there. But you can guess. Still, people say you look wonderful. But beneath all that white powder, all that oil and effort, there's a silence. No one speaks of a space between shame and secrecy, because the parts no one sees, they still need cleaning too. You don't talk about it, not with your friends, not with your family, certainly not in the open-air bathhouse where gossip echoes louder than footsteps. But it's still part of you, still needs care, still gets dirty, and yet there's no soap, no warm water on demand, no products, no instructions, just old cloth, or ash, or strips of papyrus rough and crumbling. Some use dried moss, some use sand. Women especially learn to make do. Not from their mothers, who are just as confused, but from whispers, from trial and error, from wounds that fester, then fade, then return. There are no sanitary pads, no antiseptics, no clean bathrooms where you can shut a door and be alone with your body. Menstrual blood, soak it up with fabric, then rinse it out in shared basins, eyes lowered, pretending it's nothing. Infection pain. Strange smells, call it imbalance. Bad luck. A test from the gods. Never call it what it is. There's vinegar. There's urine. Some swear by wine or salt. Others just pray. It's not that people don't care. They care too much. But only about what's visible. They care how you smell so long as it's the perfume on your neck. They care how you look so long as it's your face in candlelight. But what about the parts that ache quietly? The ones that itch in the heat. The ones that bleed. And don't stop. The ones that carry life and death. No one checks. No one helps. You sit on a cold bench, legs crossed, trying not to wince. The vinegar you used this morning is still burning. But you smile when someone passes. You even say hello. Because being clean in Rome isn't about being safe. It's about pretending. Pretending you're not in pain. Pretending your body obeys the rules. Pretending your silence means you're doing it right. But you're not, and neither is anyone else. And just when you think it couldn't get stranger, you remember how they bathed the children. Not with warm milk, not with soap, but with something far more shocking. You think back to your first bath. Maybe it was warm, gentle, a lullaby in the background. But here, in ancient Rome, that softness didn't exist. A Roman baby's first experience with cleanliness. Not a basin of sweet-smelling herbs, not the soft cloth of a mother's careful hand, but urine, specifically goat urine, sometimes cow, sometimes even their own. Because Roman tradition believed urine had cleansing power, ammonia, after all, was considered a purifier. And what better way to prepare a newborn for the harsh world ahead than to soak their fragile skin in what the body had already cast out? Midwives did this as ritual. They'd dip a sponge or cloth in the yellow liquid and gently wipe the infant's arms, legs, and face. Not to harm them, to protect them, to toughen them up, to cleanse away bad spirits, to keep sickness away. Sometimes they added herbs, sometimes not. Sometimes the cloth was old and crusted, sometimes reused. You might see a baby crying, not from cold but from sting. And no one would hush them, because this was strength, this was love, this was Roman hygiene. And it didn't stop there. Children were rubbed down with vinegar, left to sun-dry under harsh daylight, told to endure, not complain, to be spotless but not soft. If a child got sick, some families would try another cure, a full-body rub-down in animal urine, followed by scraping with strigil, followed by more sun. If they cried, it was seen as weakness. If they stayed still, it was praised as noble. No child was spared, rich or poor, male or female. Every Roman baby was raised in the shadows of marble and myths, and soaked in fluids no modern nursery would allow. You think of the babies today, wrapped in soft towels, their lotions pH balanced, their bathwater warm, filtered pure, and then you picture Rome, a stone floor, a bucket of goat urine, a child screaming, and no one blinking. Because in Rome you were taught to survive your body, not love it, and certainly not protect it. And when they grew up, when they entered the bathhouses as adults, they thought they'd left all that behind. But no, the danger didn't stop at childhood. It only got slipperier. You take one careful step into the tepidarium, the warm room, but your foot slips. Not a full fall, just enough to make your heart race. You catch yourself, but now you're alert. Because the floor beneath you, it's not just wet, it's layered. Water, yes, but also oil. Slick trails of olive residue smeared from dozens of bodies. Then dust kicked in from the street. Hair, bits of skin, and sometimes blood. It's a stew. A gray, shimmering paste on polished stone. They didn't use mats, no towels on the floor. Just marble slabs smoothed by time and thousands of bare feet. You see a child skid near the edge. He laughs. Someone cheers. But the old man limping beside him doesn't smile. Because he remembers. He remembers the time someone didn't get back up. It happened more often than you'd think. One wrong step, and your legs twisted. Your wrist shattered. Your head cracked against imperial stone. There are no lifeguards here. No railings. No warning signs. If you fall, someone might drag you to the side, maybe, if they're not too busy talking politics, or flirting, or yelling over the echoes. Sometimes they don't even notice. The steam fogs the corners. The heat makes people woozy. The floor looks clean until your foot lands on something soft, a piece of rotten fruit maybe, or something else that shouldn't be there. Strigil blades get dropped. People step on them, slip, cut themselves. You look down. Your toes are curled slightly now, trying to grip something solid. But there's no grip, only the illusion of safety. And yet people kept coming, day after day, because slipping and falling were seen as part of the experience. You got hurt, you should have been more careful. You broke a bone, that's your problem. You died well, at least you died clean. The bathhouse wasn't a refuge, it was a ritual, and risk was part of the cleansing. And if the floors didn't get you, something else might. Something smaller, something living, hiding in the cracks of the stone walls, waiting for the lights to dim. You're sitting on the bench, wrapping your towel around your shoulder, when you hear it, a soft rustle, Then, a faint skitter, not far, behind you, in the wall. You glance over your shoulder. Nothing. Just a crack in the ancient stone, dark and unmoving. But that sound, you weren't imagining it. There are rats here. You've heard the others mention it between conversations about taxes and gladiators. Just don't leave your sandals near the wall, one man said with a shrug. Because they'll take them. They're not afraid. They've lived here longer than most of the bathers. Down in the drainage channels, behind the mosaic tiles, between the heated walls where it's warm and damp. Food is everywhere. Scraps of bread, rotten fruit, the occasional forgotten lunch from a careless visitor. And then there are the towels, soft, sweaty, soaked in oil. Rats love those. You see one now. Just a blur. It darts from one side of the room to the other, its claws clicking against the stone. Nobody reacts. The man next to you doesn't even flinch. He just mutters something about the smell and closes his eyes, because this is normal. This is Rome. You've heard stories of rats crawling into bags, gnawing through leather, chewing through baskets to get at someone's perfumed balm. At night, when the bathhouses close, they say the walls come alive. You imagine them swarming, filling the warm floors, nesting under benches, hiding behind statues. One slave claimed a rat bit his foot while he was mopping up after hours. He didn't scream. He wasn't allowed to. Instead, he wrapped it in a dirty cloth and kept working. That's how infections start. That's how fevers begin. You stare at the wall again. That crack seems deeper now, wider. Was that movement? You pull your towel tighter. Suddenly the stone feels less stable beneath you. The wall's less safe. Even the heat can't hide the feeling creeping up your spine. Because here in this empire of elegance and power, even in its grandest spaces of leisure, the wild still lives. The empire may stretch from desert to sea, but its walls, they belong to the rats. But vermin weren't the only thing spreading quietly through these bathhouses. Sometimes the true danger didn't skitter across the floor. It coughed. It itched. It whispered from skin to skin. It's not just you. There are dozens of bodies pressed into the same space, all breathing, all sweating, all pretending they don't feel the same discomfort crawling across their skin. The bathhouse is full, shoulder to shoulder, voices bouncing off the stone walls, steam thick in the air clinging to your face like a damp veil. Someone coughs. It echoes sharper than it should. You glance in their direction. They don't cover their mouth. No one says anything. You all just pretend it didn't happen. Because to say something is to admit it's real. There are no windows, no breeze, no airflow. The only ventilation is the door you walked in through, and that stays closed to keep the heat in. So whatever enters the room, it stays. A rash on someone's back, a sore on a man's lip, a strange discoloration on the boy sitting in the corner. You see them, but you say nothing, because it's easier that way. Easier to believe that the heat will kill it, that the oils will protect you, that you are clean and the disease is someone else's. A man nearby is scratching, slow, persistent. You watch the red streaks trail down his arm. He notices your eyes. He smiles. You look away. You try to focus on the warmth, on the comfort, on the luxury this place is supposed to offer. But all you feel is the itch, the possibility, the quiet fear. Because you know now, this isn't just a bathhouse. It's a breeding ground for ringworm, for lice, for scabies and boils and things with names you don't want to know. Skin touches skin here. Oils are shared. Towels passed from person to person. No one disinfects. No one even knows the word. It's not their fault. They've never heard of germs. To them, disease is punishment, divine retribution. Not something that travels on a cough. You pull your towel higher, not for warmth, but as a shield. But you know it's no use, because the disease doesn't need permission. It just needs a room like this, packed, sweaty, silent, and Rome gave it plenty. And if the bathhouse felt suffocating, then the steam rooms, those were something else entirely. Not just warm, not just crowded, but stale, as if every breath inside had been used before. You step inside the caldarium, the hottest room in the bathhouse, and immediately your skin begins to sting. The air is heavy, not with heat alone, but with weight, like the room itself is pressing down on your lungs. You inhale and taste it, The sweat, the oil, the bodies, not just your own. The steam has no color, but you can feel its texture. Thick, greasy, like it's been recycled 100 times, which it has. The water poured on the heated stones has sat in the same tubs for days. Used, reused, warmed by fire, but never cleaned. You find a seat, stone, slick, slightly warm, not from the fire, but from the person who sat there before you. There's a man beside you. His eyes are closed, his chest rising and falling in rhythm. But there's a tremble in his fingers. Across the room, a boy sways. His back rests against the wall, then slides down. No one rushes over. He's not the first to faint. He won't be the last. Because in here, there's no fresh air, no exit breeze, only breath upon breath, moisture upon moisture. Every exhale becoming someone else's inhale. Your own sweat starts to pool at your elbows. But you can't tell if it's yours or just condensation from the man dripping behind you. The walls are beaded with moisture. It rolls down in trails, dislodging flakes of old oil, dead skin, and maybe more. The slaves come in, occasionally pouring more water on the stones. It hisses, then clouds the room again, thicker, hotter, heavier. They never clean. They only feed the steam. You try to breathe through your mouth. It helps, for a moment. But then you taste something bitter, like burnt herbs and old sweat. Your head begins to spin, a soft ringing in your ears. You close your eyes, but the heat follows. Time melts in this place. Minutes feel like hours. There's no sun, no light, just the low hum of suffering. And this, they say, is good for you. When you finally stumble out of the steam, dizzy and slick with more than your own sweat, a slave hands you a towel. It's damp, warm, and smells like someone else, because it was theirs. Just minutes ago, the towel is thin, frayed at the edges, and unmistakably damp. You hesitate, but there's nothing else to reach for. So you pat your face with it and try not to think about who came before. Next, a slave offers you a strigil, a curved metal blade used to scrape oil and sweat from the skin. He doesn't clean it between users, just wipes it quickly with a cloth that looks older than the empire. You hand over your arm. He draws the blade along your skin. A gritty drag, then another, then another. The strigil leaves a trail of grime behind, not because it's pulling it off, but because it's layering it on. You glimpse the bucket nearby. It's filled with grayish water, oily on top with floating bits of skin and hair. The cloth gets dipped again and again. The strigil goes from man to man, back to chest, leg to armpit, without a rinse. There are no antiseptics, no soap, no hot water baths. Only that same foul-smelling rag and the flick of a careless hand. On the bench beside you, another man blows his nose into a towel, then tosses it on the stack of clean linens. You recognize one. It was on your back 5 minutes ago. There's a small tub near the exit. It's meant for rinsing off, but there's no flow of water, just a stagnant pool, discolored and still. Children splash their feet in it. One of them slips. A woman helps him up with a towel and presses it to a bleeding knee. She folds it and tosses it back in the pile. That same towel might dry someone's face before dinner. The tools of hygiene, the strigil's towel sponges, are not personal items here. They are communal. And in Rome, communal means contaminated. The tersorium, a shared sponge on a stick, used for wiping sits in a vinegar bucket in the latrine. That bucket hasn't been emptied since sunrise. The vinegar barely masks the smell, but the sponge gets reused. Dozens of times a day. No one talks about this. No one questions it, because this is the system. This is the standard. This is Roman cleanliness. And it's not clean. Not by any measure we'd recognize. You start to wonder, what does it feel like to be the one who cleans others in a place that never feels clean? In Rome, even that role came with shame. The towel is thin, frayed at the edges, and unmistakably damp. You hesitate, but there's nothing else to reach for. So you pat your face with it and try not to think about who came before. Next, a slave offers you a strigil, a curved metal blade used to scrape oil and sweat from the skin. He doesn't clean it between users, just wipes it quickly with a cloth that looks older than the empire. You hand over your arm. He draws the blade along your skin. A gritty drag, then another, then another. The strigil leaves a trail of grime behind. Not because it's pulling it off, but because it's layering it on. You glimpse the bucket nearby. It's filled with grayish water, oily on top with floating bits of skin and hair. The cloth gets dipped again and again. The strigil goes from man to man, back to chest, leg to armpit, without a rinse. There are no antiseptics, no soap, no hot water baths, only that same foul-smelling rag and the flick of a careless hand. On the bench beside you, another man blows his nose into a towel, then tosses it on the stack of clean linens. You recognize one it was on your back 5 minutes ago. There's a small tub near the exit. It's meant for rinsing off. But there's no flow of water, just a stagnant pool, discolored and still. Children splash their feet in it. One of them slips. A woman helps him up with a towel and presses it to a bleeding knee. She folds it and tosses it back in the pile. That same towel might dry someone's face before dinner. The tools of hygiene, the strigil's towel sponges, are not personal items here. They are communal. And in Rome, communal means contaminated. The tersorium, a shared sponge on a stick used for wiping, sits in a vinegar bucket in the latrine. That bucket hasn't been emptied since sunrise. The vinegar barely masks the smell, but the sponge gets reused, dozens of times a day. No one talks about this. No one questions it. Because this is the system. This is the standard. This is Roman cleanliness, and it's not clean. Not by any measure we'd recognize. You start to wonder, what does it feel like to be the one who cleans others in a place that never feels clean? In Rome, even that role came with shame. He doesn't look at you. Not when he takes the strigil from your hand. Not when he kneels to scrub the oil from your legs. Not even when you flinch because it stings. He's just a boy. 14, maybe 15. But his eyes have already learned not to meet yours. He is a slave. His entire job is to deal with filth not his own, but yours. And that makes him invisible. In Roman society, there were slaves for every task. Some tended gardens, some tutored children, some brought wine. But bath slaves, they were lowest of all. Their work was physical, repetitive, degrading, cleansing others, handling their sweat, their skin, their waste. A citizen might praise his body, but never thank the one who scraped it clean. Instead, these slaves were ignored, or worse, despised. If one accidentally touched a freeman the wrong way, he could be slapped. If a towel slipped or a strigil scratched too hard, he might be beaten, right there in public, in front of everyone. No one would intervene. Because touching dirt, especially someone else's, wasn't just gross. It was humiliating, contagious. Even other slaves avoided them, as if filth could climb social ladders. Some bath slaves were children, abandoned at birth, or sold into labor. Some were captured in war. None had a choice, and over time, even they began to believe that they were dirty, that their hands could never truly be clean no matter how many backs they scrubbed. You notice one slave trying to rinse a blood-stained towel in a cracked basin. He keeps scrubbing the same spot, over and over. Not because it will help, but because it's the only control he has. Another one slips, falls into a puddle of oil and hair. No one helps him up. Someone laughs. You dry off with a cloth he just washed, and you realize even the tools of Roman hygiene carried traces of shame. The empire prized the appearance of cleanliness. But it came at a cost, and that cost was paid by the hands you never noticed. And while someone scraped your back and whispered clean, something toxic simmered quietly beneath the fire that heated the water, was poisoning the very air you breathed. You're told it's a luxury, this hot water, this steam rising from the caldarium pool. But you notice something strange. Your chest feels tight, your head just a little dizzy. You blame the heat, the crowd, maybe the oil still clinging to your skin. But it's more than that. The water in Roman baths didn't heat itself, and there was no electricity, no gas, only fire. And the fire came from charcoal, wood, fuel that when burned in enclosed spaces did more than warm the water. It released smoke, fumes, carbon monoxide. The hypocaust system, a marvel of Roman engineering, channeled heat beneath the floors through hollow bricks and flues in the walls. It kept rooms warm, floors, toasty pools, steaming. But it also trapped toxins. The lower the ceiling, the thicker the crowd, the longer the exposure, the more your lungs became saturated. There were no warning signs, no carbon detectors, just faintness, nausea. A sudden collapse mistaken for heat exhaustion. Old men would sit too long in the steam, then fail to stand. Slaves would stoke fires in rooms with little ventilation, their coughs echoing into the tiles. Children might pass out mid-bath, their bodies limp against the marble edge. And no one connected the dots, because what they craved, what they celebrated, was heat. It meant status. It meant comfort. It meant being clean. So they breathed in poison in the name of purification. Even emperors indulged. Some built entire wings of their villas around bathhouses. Steam was considered rejuvenating, a balm for aches, a cure for aging. But the truth was quieter. It clung to your lungs. It blurred your vision. It waited invisible until one breath became your last. You sit by the pool, legs dangling. A man next to you dozes off. You wonder, is he relaxed? Or slipping under, a slave refills the coals below. He doesn't wear a mask. He doesn't look up. You inhale, and your lungs protest, but you smile, because everyone else is smiling. And that in Rome was cleaner than the truth. But even if the steam didn't choke you, what waited in the water just might. The pools weren't just hot, they were alive. You finally make your way to the main pool, the therma, a place meant for soaking, relaxing, maybe even floating for a moment, if your limbs still have the strength. It's warm, almost inviting. Steam rolls gently across the surface. You dip a toe in, then your whole foot, then a pause. Did something brush past your leg? You glance at the water. It's murky, not because it's dirty, at least not in a way you can see, but because it's full of bodies, of sweat, of leftover oil and flakes of skin scraped earlier by the strigil and now floating gently, everywhere. And it hasn't been changed. Not for hours, not since yesterday. Sometimes not since the day before that, because water is expensive. Hauling it in, heating it, that takes effort, manpower would. So the same water is used again, and again, and again. By the time you ease into the pool, 100 people have already bathed here and left something behind. You look around. Children splash near the edge. One of them coughs, rubs their eyes, sinks under for a second. The man next to you scratches his thigh. You pretend not to notice the reddish rash spreading under his skin. You feel something tickle your calf. Is it just a ripple, or something alive? Because it's not just sweat. It's not just oil. In these lukewarm waters, parasites thrive. Worms, nematodes, flukes. They enter through cuts, through skin, through places you'd rather not think about. And then they settle. Inside you. A minor itch one day. A stomach ache the next. Then, a fever that doesn't break. People die from what they catch here. They call it bad luck, or bad humors. But you know better. You just sat in the same water where someone with open sores had been soaking, where children peed, where rats had drowned overnight and were quietly scooped out before dawn. There's no drainage system, just a bucket and a tired slave, and a prayer that today won't be the day you catch something worse than embarrassment. You stand, your legs feel heavy, your skin feels coated. You want to wash it off. But there's nowhere to go, because all the water is the same. And the next bathhouse is just as full. And so you step out, not cleaner, not safer, just wetter, and very possibly infected. Maybe that's why they tried to cover it all up with fire, with perfumes, with burning oils so thick they'd burn your skin before they masked the truth. You've made it out of the pool, or at least you've escaped its embrace. But now, you stink. Not in a metaphorical way. You truly stink like rancid oil, old sweat, and the faint metallic tang of someone else's skin. So what does a civilized Roman do? You head toward the aroma rooms. The air gets warmer again, but not in the soft, misty way it did near the baths. Here the heat is sharp, dry, and it smells intense. At first, it's pleasant, a whiff of lavender, a sweet breath of rosewood, then myrrh, then cinnamon. But then something shifts. It gets thick, suffocating. You squint as smoke curls from a bronze dish sitting atop a brazier. A slave pours oil onto it, and whoosh. The room fills instantly. You cough. So do others. But no one leaves, because this is part of the process. This is what hides the truth. Because after everything, the sweat, the dirt, the bodily fluids, what matters now is how you smell. You stand with your arms raised. A boy dabs your neck with a cloth soaked in scented resin. Another wafts smoke your way using a large feather fan. It feels like incense. It feels like a ritual. Until it feels like a mistake, your eyes begin to water. Your skin itches. The resin is sticky. The smoke clings. Your throat closes a little more with each breath. Then someone screams. Not loudly, just a sudden gasp. A woman's sleeve caught fire. The oils were too thick, the flame too close. A slave rushes to pat it out. Another pours water from a bowl. But the damage is done. She stumbles away, arm blistering already. No one follows. They just adjust their positions. Make room for the next one. You stay, because you're expected to. And then it's your turn to step closer to the brazier. You feel the heat radiating from it, your skin tightening under the glow. A servant pats your chest with a lump of burning gum resin. Fragrant, yes, but hot. Too hot. You flinch. A welt forms immediately. No one reacts. This is the cost of refinement. Smelling nice isn't a choice. It's survival. If you walk out of here still smelling like the pool, you'll be shamed, mocked. Maybe even refuse service at the next meal. So you endure it. The fire, the smoke, the perfumed burns. You step out of the room minutes later, eyes red, throat raw, skin sizzling beneath your robe. But now you smell like Rome's version of perfection. And that's all anyone will notice. But don't get too comfortable, because no matter how clean you feel, your towel's already gone past onto someone else. In Rome, nothing is just yours. Not your scent, not your space, not even your dirt. There's a chill in the air now. Not because it's cold, but because you're wet exposed and suddenly aware of it. You reach for your towel, but it's gone. Someone else is using it. Not a thief, just the next person in line. In the Roman bathhouse, towels aren't labeled. They're not personal. They're just part of the rotation. You blink confused. A slave shrugs. He points to a pile, nearby, a stack of used cloths, damp-stained and barely folded. You pick one up. It's warm, but not in a comforting way. Warm like it's just left someone else's body. You dry yourself anyway. Not because you want to, but because there's nothing else to do. Around you, the room is crowded. Shoulders brush, skin touches. Everyone is naked, and no one seems to mind. Or rather, they've been trained not to mind. You try to find a place to sit. There are no partitions, no benches, just smooth stone ledges, already occupied. A man shifts to make space, but it's not enough. You perch awkwardly, half-hip on the stone, half-air. Your thigh presses against his. He doesn't flinch, neither do you, but inside your nerves scream. Someone else reaches across your back to retrieve a jug of oil. Their arm brushes your shoulder. Their hair dangles across your cheek. You inhale sharply. Across the room, a group of men laugh loud, carefree, unfiltered. They joke about politics, women, wagers. One of them makes eye contact. He nods, inviting you in. You look away. You just want to dry off. But drying off isn't the point. Bathing here is about exposure. Social exposure, physical exposure, psychological exposure. You are seen. You are sized up. You are judged. You wipe your arms again, the towel now cool and clammy. It smells faintly of vinegar and old oil. It smells like everyone else. You stand unsure where to go next. Because the truth is, there's nowhere to go that's just for you. No cubicle, no locker, no curtain, only stone, steam, and strangers. This, they say, is cleanliness. This, they say, is civilization. But to you, it feels like something else, something you wouldn't volunteer for, something you wouldn't recommend, something you wouldn't survive, if you had to do it every day. You could leave now, but what would that say about you? In Rome, being clean wasn't enough. You had to look clean, act clean, or risk being seen as something worse, uncivilized. Dirty, dangerous. You're tempted to skip your next visit, to stay home, to avoid the heat, the crowd, the smell, to keep your clothes on for once. But Rome doesn't like that. Here, bathing isn't a personal choice. It's a public expectation, a social obligation. If you didn't bathe regularly, people noticed. Neighbors whispered, coworkers wrinkled their noses, and soon the label followed. Barbarian. Not because you raided villages, not because you spoke a different tongue, but because you smelled, because you didn't scrape your skin until it burned, because you didn't sit naked with 100 others, because you didn't drip oil like an olive tree in July. Your status was measured by your scent. Your cleanliness was your costume. And if you didn't wear it, you were shamed. Slaves were instructed to escort their masters to the bathhouse, not as a courtesy, as a duty. There were even laws in some Roman households: master must bathe thrice weekly. Failure. A beating for the slave. Because if the master stank, it was the slave's fault. Imagine that. Your body, your smell, a matter of legal record. Some employers inspected their workers each morning. No oil on the arms, no sheen on the face, sent home, or worse, publicly mocked. And for women, it could be even stricter. A wife who didn't smell of lavender, a daughter who didn't glisten, considered ungrateful, ungroomed, unworthy. You didn't just bathe for yourself. You bathed for your name, your family, your future. Children learned it early. Tiberius smells like dung was more damaging than a failing grade or a missed recitation. No one wanted to sit next to the smelly one in rhetoric class. And when plague seasons hit, the irony came full circle. Those who bathed often were among the first to die. Their raw skin, their open pores, their steam-warmed lungs, perfect gateways for infection. But still, they bathed. Because not bathing meant exile. From society, from favor, from dignity. You didn't risk that. No one did. Better to strip, scrape, oil, pretend. Better to die clean than live dirty, at least in their eyes. And of course, if you were rich, you didn't have to share towels, or strigils, or shame. You had something else entirely: a personal slave, a body servant, someone whose entire job was to make sure you were clean and stayed that way. You're tempted to skip your next visit, to stay home, to avoid the heat, the crowd, the smell, to keep your clothes on for once. But Rome doesn't like that. Here, bathing isn't a personal choice. It's a public expectation, a social obligation. If you didn't bathe regularly, people noticed. Neighbors whispered, co-workers wrinkled their noses, and soon the label followed. Barbarian. Not because you raided villages, not because you spoke a different tongue, but because you smelled. Because you didn't scrape your skin until it burned. Because you didn't sit naked with 100 others. Because you didn't drip oil like an olive tree in July. Your status was measured by your scent. Your cleanliness was your costume. And if you didn't wear it, you were shamed. Slaves were instructed to escort their masters to the bathhouse, not as a courtesy, as a duty. There were even laws in some Roman households: master must bathe thrice weekly. Failure. A beating for the slave. Because if the master stank, it was the slave's fault. Imagine that. Your body, your smell, a matter of legal record. Some employers inspected their workers each morning. No oil on the arms, no sheen on the face, sent home, or worse, publicly mocked. And for women, it could be even stricter. A wife who didn't smell of lavender, a daughter who didn't glisten, considered ungrateful, ungroomed, unworthy. You didn't just bathe for yourself. You bathed for your name, your family, your future. Children learned it early. Tiberius smells like dung was more damaging than a failing grade or a missed recitation. No one wanted to sit next to the smelly one in rhetoric class. And when plague seasons hit, the irony came full circle. Those who bathed often were among the first to die. Their raw skin, their open pores, their steam-warmed lungs, perfect gateways for infection. But still, they bathed, because not bathing meant exile. From society, from favor, from dignity. You didn't risk that. No one did. Better to strip, scrape, oil, pretend. Better to die clean than live dirty, at least in their eyes. And of course, if you were rich, you didn't have to share towels, or strigils, or shame. You had something else entirely: a personal slave, a body servant, someone whose entire job was to make sure you were clean and stayed that way. You don't carry your own towels. You don't pour your own water. You're a Roman elite, which means you have slaves for that. Your personal bath slave wakes before sunrise. He heats the water, gathers the oils, lays out your sandals, checks the strigil for rust. His name is Tiro, though you've never said it aloud. He's not here to be known. He's here to scrub your back, and he better not drop the towel. In this world, bathing is a ritual of rank. You don't walk into a bathhouse like everyone else, slapping shoulders with merchants or brushing thighs with farmers. No, you enter through a side door, a private entrance, drapes, not doors, incense, not sweat. Tiro lays a cushion down so you don't have to touch the cold bench. You sit and wait for the oil to be warm. You've never questioned why it has to be exactly the right temperature. It just does. Tiro pours it in spirals across your back. His hands move quickly, not tenderly, more like polishing marble than caring for a person. Because in his eyes, you aren't a person either. You're a roll. And so is he. He scrapes the oil from your skin. He catches it in a bowl. It's gray now, flecked with dirt, skin, sweat, maybe a cut you didn't feel. He doesn't flinch. He's trained not to. He wipes it down with a cloth, folds it twice, and starts again. If he misses a spot, you'll feel the edge of your father's cane tonight. You think you are clean. But Tiro knows better. He sees your flaking heels, the crease in your armpit that still smells like last night's wine. He wants to say something, but he doesn't. A slave who speaks without being asked might lose more than his job. It's not just the body that gets polished here. It's status. Bath slaves are part of the show. When your guests arrive, they see how well you're attended, how smooth your arms are, how quickly your orders are obeyed. You nod once. Tiro hands you a warm towel with both hands and eyes lowered. He kneels as you rise, so your silhouette is uninterrupted by his presence. He will clean up the mess. He will wash the floor. He will scrub the oil-stained cloth. You won't see it. That's the point. Cleanliness in Rome is theatrical. But the suffering is real. And when you step out of the bathhouse, glowing, gleaming, flawless, he remains in the shadows, dirty, silent, disposable. You want to relax. You just want to get clean. But the bathhouse has other plans. There are no curtains here. No signs that say men or women. Just steam and stone and bodies moving through both like shadows. And if you're young, especially if you're a slave, you're already being watched. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows. The caldarium is packed today. People jostle for space near the fire-warmed pool. You try not to brush against anyone. You try not to make eye contact. But someone's hand stays on your shoulder a moment too long. A laugh behind you sounds too close. You turn, and no one meets your eyes. You keep walking. In theory, the baths are for everyone. In practice, power moves through this place like steam, invisible but inescapable. The wealthy laugh loudly. They take up space. They grab what they want, including people. The poor stay quiet, slaves stay quieter. You've seen it before. A boy pulled behind a column. A girl cornered near the hippocaust. Nothing violent, nothing loud. Just hands where they shouldn't be. Whispers like knives. And the worst part, no one stops it. They pretend not to notice. Because that's just how it is. Because complaining means you're soft. Or worse, you're next. There are stories about men of power who visit just to see the new slaves. About women who pay for attendance not because they need help bathing, but because they don't want to be alone. Even the architecture helps it hide. So many corners, so many shadows, so many reasons to look away. And if you do speak up, you'll be laughed at, or punished, or blamed for being too beautiful, too young, too clean. Because in Rome, your body is not your own. Not when you're poor, not when you're powerless, and definitely not when you're naked in a room full of people who think touching is part of the experience. You want to scream, but instead you move to the cold room. Wrap your towel tighter, keep your head down, and tell yourself next time you'll bathe at night, when fewer eyes are watching, when the steam is thick enough to hide in, even if it means missing dinner, even if it means scrubbing your skin until it hurts. Because in this city, staying clean is dangerous. But being alone in the bathhouse, that's worse. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Your skin still tingles from the strigil. The oil hasn't quite come off. And now, you're stuck not just in steam and sweat, but in someone else's story. The man beside you is talking about his hemorrhoids. Loudly, in detail. The woman across the aisle is complaining about her husband's new mistress. The boy behind you is arguing about chariot races. Someone mentions a senator's scandal. Someone else jokes about a temple priest caught stealing perfume. And you're just trying to rinse your legs. But silence is suspicious here. If you don't join in, people notice. If you don't laugh at the joke about pubic lice, someone might ask, "Too good to laugh with us?" You smile. You nod. You chuckle at the story about the man who slipped on vomit near the caldarium. But inside, you're somewhere else. This place was never just about getting clean. It's a theater, a marketplace of gossip, A courtroom, a confessional, a comedy show, all rolled into one. No privacy, no escape. You hear a woman complain about her daughter's marriage, a man brag about his son's new slave. Two merchants whisper about a bribe, their voices barely louder than the dripping water. You try not to listen, but it's like trying not to smell the oil and sweat in the air. It clings to you. A stranger asks your name, then your trade. Then if you've ever had your back waxed by goat resin, you lie. You say yes. You don't want to be the weird one. Because here, clean means more than scrubbed skin. It means being likable, fitting in, smiling when they smile even if your head is pounding from the heat. This is not your story, but you're living in it. And when you finally step out into the cool air, your ears are ringing, your thoughts are tangled with voices that aren't yours, and your body feels no cleaner than when you arrived. You came here to wash away the day. Instead, you walked into everyone else's. At first, it seems like a privilege. You have servants to carry your towels, expensive oils lined up in little glass bottles, a strigil made of silver, and a personal attendant who knows the exact pressure you prefer when scraping your back. You're the envy of the bathhouse. You smell like imported cinnamon. Your skin glows from daily exfoliation. Your toenails shine like polished ivory, and yet, you dread bath day. Because you can't miss it, you can't skip it, you can't say no. You are clean always, and everyone expects you to stay that way. Your neighbors would notice a speck of dirt on your cloak. Your friends would frown if your perfume faded. Your husband touches your arm and says you've missed a spot. Your wife sighs if your breath smells less than mint. So you scrub harder. You sit longer in the steam. You reapply the oils twice, 3 times, just in case. You used to enjoy it. Now you dread looking in the mirror. Not because of dirt, but because you don't know who you are anymore beneath all the oils and powders. A historian would later describe noble women in Rome as wax statues, polished to death. One senator's wife was known to faint at the sight of unshaven legs. Another woman reportedly wept just because she ran out of imported rose oil. We'd call it obsessive now. Back then, it was called virtue. Cleanliness wasn't just a routine, it was a performance. And for many, it became a prison. There were no days off, no room to be tired, no space to say, not today. Because not today meant rumors, that you were falling ill, that your marriage was in trouble, that maybe you'd gone mad. Some women began to avoid the mirror altogether. Some men scratched themselves raw, convinced they weren't clean enough. There were even whispered tales of bathhouse suicides, people who couldn't bear one more day of polishing a body they no longer recognized, and no one questioned it, because they died clean. Their skin was perfect, their scent divine, their lives unbearably polished. You don't have a strigil, you don't have oils, you don't even have enough water in your home to wash your feet every day. But you still need to look clean, because if you don't, you're not just dirty, you're less. In Rome, cleanliness wasn't just about hygiene. It was a status symbol, a way to tell the world I belong. But if you're poor, you can't afford the entrance fee to the public baths every day. So you fake it. You borrow your cousin's towel. You smear olive oil on your arms, cheap stuff rancid from last month's market. You rub it in fast, hoping the smell passes for earthy, not rotten. Then you walk through the streets like you've just stepped out of the frigidarium. Head high, skin shiny, but deep down, you know one rainstorm and the illusion is over. Others go further. They hang around outside the bathhouses waiting. When someone wealthy drops a towel or leaves a half-used vial of oil, they snatch it up. It's not theft, it's survival. Some even create entire routines to appear recently bathed, sitting on warm stones to mimic the steam, splashing a few drops of wine on their skin to fake the scent of luxury. Running into the bathhouse just long enough to get damp, then walking back out with pride. Because appearances mattered. So much, in fact, that a man was once fined not for being dirty, but for being seen dirty. Children learned early. A dusty face meant you sat at the back of the classroom. Uncombed hair. No lunch invitation. People weren't just judged for being unwashed, they were punished. If you stank, you were avoided. If your tunic was stained, you were denied work. If your nails were chipped, you were told to stand outside. So you spent what little you had, not on bread, not on rent, but on soap, substitutes, perfume scraps, and access to a water barrel that everyone else had already used. Because in ancient Rome, to be clean was to be accepted, and to be poor meant pretending. Every single day. Even if it meant going to bed hungry, as long as you smelled like lavender. It was a tightrope. In Rome, cleanliness wasn't a simple yes or no. It was a delicate, exhausting balance. Bathe too rarely, and you were disgusting. An animal. A barbarian. Someone who couldn't be trusted with a handshake, let alone a dinner invitation. But bathe too often, and suddenly you were ridiculous, vain, suspiciously eager. Maybe even hiding something. There were no clear rules, just unspoken lines. Everyone feared crossing. You never knew if your scent was subtly fragrant or trying too hard, if your skin glowed or gleamed like you were dipped in grease. There was a senator, Marcus Petronius, who once arrived at a feast, freshly oiled, hair still, damp skin radiant. He smelled of myrrh and fig leaves. He looked like marble come to life. And yet, halfway through the meal, he was asked to leave. Too polished, they whispered. Trying to impress. His hosts never invited him again. He became a cautionary tale. Don't be a Petronius. On the other end of the spectrum were the naturals, people who claimed dirt was a virtue. That sweat meant labor. That the gods themselves didn't care how you smelled. But no one wanted to sit next to them. Even the poor tried to bathe when they could. Even the soldiers scrubbed their sandals. Because if you didn't try, it meant you'd given up. And Rome had no patience for quitters. So you walked a fine line. You dabbed oil, but only behind the ears. You let your hair fall, slightly messy but not wild. You washed your tunic, but made sure it wasn't too white. Because Rome didn't want clean people. It wanted clean performances. No wonder people were anxious. Women cried over cracked heels. Men debated whether to oil their elbows or not. Children were punished for smelling common. There were no winners, only players, and judges everywhere. Even the gods were drawn into it. Temple priests were expected to be ritually clean, but even they got mocked if they bathed too long. Public bathhouses had regulars who kept score. She came 3 days in a row, desperate. He skipped a week, poor thing. It was exhausting, not just on the body, but on the soul. And so being clean in Rome wasn't about hygiene. It was a social game, a performance, a trap with no exits, too much, too little, never just right, never safe. In ancient Rome, cleanliness wasn't just a habit for women. It was a duty, a demand, and it was never truly about hygiene. It was about pleasing the male gaze. Your skin had to be smooth, but not too polished, scented, but not overpowering, hairless, but not unnatural, attractive, but not seductive. It was a paradox built by men. And women had to live inside it. You couldn't choose your own definition of clean. Society chose for you. And by society, they meant your husband, your father, your neighbors, your master. If a woman skipped a bath, she was lazy. But if she bathed too often, she was loose. If she used oils, she was vain. If she didn't, she was disgusting. One woman, Junia, a wealthy matron from the Aventine Hill, was known for her rose-scented oil and perfectly shaven arms. Men complimented her skin. But behind her back, other women whispered, "She's trying too hard." Her husband, he liked her clean, but not obsessed. Scented, but not floral. Shiny, but not slippery. She never got it right, because there was no right. Young girls were taught how to pluck hairs from their arms before they were taught how to write their names. They learned where to apply perfume and how much was decent. They watched their mothers scrape strigils across their legs until red lines appeared. And they learned not to flinch. A girl who refused, "She'll never marry," they'd say. Even female slaves weren't exempt. They had to be clean for their masters. Scrubbed, scented, silent. But never too clean, or else they risked unwanted attention, or worse. Some women tried to rebel. They wore their hair loose, they bathed less. They let their skin stay dry and real. But the cost was high. People stopped inviting them to gatherings. They were called strange, witches, unwomanly. Cleanliness wasn't self-care in Rome. It was performance, submission. An exhausting, endless ritual to appease standards no woman had set, but all were expected to follow. There were no female spaces of privacy. Even in bathhouses, women shared space with male attendants. Their bodies were always on display, judged, compared, whispered about, and so every drop of oil, every pluck of hair, every wash of cloth wasn't just about dirt. It was about survival, about fitting in, about not being shamed, mocked, or dismissed. It wasn't fair. It wasn't safe. It wasn't about being clean. It was about being acceptable. You didn't choose this life. You were born into it and scrubbed into it. From the moment you could walk, you were taught that being clean was not a choice. It was a duty, a fear, a punishment waiting to happen. A little Roman boy might miss a spot on his heel, and he'd be made to stand in the sun with one sandal off. The message: let dirt shame you. A young girl forgets to apply oil before visiting her aunt, and she's met with a pinched nose and a whispered insult. Is she even raised properly? It didn't matter that your knees were scraped from play, or that your elbows were dusty from helping in the kitchen. You were expected to be spotless, not because of health, but because of honor. Mothers scraped their daughters' arms with strigils until they winced. Fathers dunked their sons into cold basins and scolded them for smelling like street dogs. The message was always the same: dirt is disgrace. You'd see other children, shiny, polished, oiled to perfection, and wonder if your skin was ever going to be Roman enough. Sometimes the punishment wasn't physical. It was silence, shame, your cousins avoiding you at dinner, your uncle refusing to kiss your cheek, a teacher making you stand in the back because you brought in the smell of the gutters. Children cried after bath days, not because they hated water, but because they feared how it was done. The harsh scraping, the boiling oils, the judgment of adults measuring their worth by the softness of their elbows. There was no celebration of curiosity, no joy in mud or clay or the smell of fresh sweat, only discipline, only correction. Some children became quiet, obsessive, washing their hands again and again until their knuckles cracked, terrified of being the smelly one, terrified of not being loved. So by the time they grew up, they didn't just bathe, they performed cleanliness. They played their roles, and they taught their own children to fear the same. Because in Rome, a clean child was not necessarily a happy child, but a dirty child was considered a disgrace to the family name. And just when you think this obsession couldn't go any deeper, you learn what they did to the dying in the name of cleanliness. You've stopped eating. Your body is weak. Breaths come shallow and spaced. Your family gathers not to comfort but to prepare. Because in ancient Rome, death wasn't just an ending. It was a final performance, and no one wanted a dirty actor. Even as you lie curled in sweat-drenched sheets, your daughter approaches with a bowl of oil. Your son brings the strigil. A slave steps in, silently holding a towel already soaked in vinegar and herbs. You want to protest, to say, "Let me rest," but your lips are too dry, your tongue too heavy. And besides, no one is asking. You're lifted, your gown removed. A cloth is pressed to your neck, scraping gently not to comfort you, but to scrape the dirt of life off your skin. They rub your arms, wipe your feet, comb your hair one last time. Not for your comfort, but so the neighbors won't whisper. A man should not meet the gods smelling of old sweat. That's what the priest says. And everyone nods like this is normal. Even the dying must be presentable. Your breath hitches when the strigil drags across a sore. No one notices. The oil is poured. The towel is wiped. They clean your ears. They clean your groin. They clean the bottoms of your feet. All while you drift somewhere between pain and fog. And when you finally pass, they dress your corpse in fresh linen, lay fragrant flowers at your chest, apply more oil, more powder, more masks. You've become a doll, polished, posed, perfectly clean for the afterlife. But no one asks if you were ever allowed to be messy. No one wonders if you died in peace. Only if you died presentable. Because in Rome, filth was not just offensive. It was unforgivable. And if you think death was the end of the performance, wait until you see how the living took cleanliness even further. You've been invited to a senator's home, a rare honor. Tonight's banquet will be filled with wine, poetry, and politics. But before you can sit at the table, you must be bathed. Not by yourself, not in private, but as part of the ritual. A young slave meets you at the entrance with a cloth and a silver bowl. He does not speak. He is trained not to. He begins with your hands, wiping each finger carefully. Then the forearms. Then your neck. The cloth is warm, scented with lavender. You want to relax, but there's a man watching from the corner. He's noting how long it takes you to undress, how well your skin glows, whether your feet are properly scraped. Because here being clean isn't enough. You must look clean, smell clean, perform clean. Another slave arrives with a small jar of oil. He rubs your arms until they shine, then powders them with crushed rose petals and chalk. Your skin becomes smooth, too smooth. You glance at your reflection, a stranger stares back. A waxy version of yourself. Shiny, pale ghost-like. The host finally enters, smiling broadly. He claps his hands once. You're ready, he says. But you're not. You feel suffocated. A layer of skin away from yourself. At the banquet table, everyone sparkles. Oiled shoulders, polished toenails, hair stiff with perfume and ash. No one sweats, no one smells. But beneath it all, you sense it. The tension, the effort, the fear. One drop of oil too much, and you're greasy. Too little neglected. A slave accidentally spills water down a senator's back. Everyone gasps. He is dragged out. The laughter resumes. You sip wine through your painted lips and think this isn't hygiene. This is theater. Because in Rome, your cleanliness wasn't for you. It was for them. And in that moment, as you try not to smudge your powdered elbow on the tablecloth, you realize being dirty might have felt more honest. It looks clean. The surface of the water is still reflecting torchlight like polished glass. But you know better. You've been watching. At dawn, the first man entered this tub. He sighed with pleasure, sank in, and washed his armpits with a rag. Then another, then 20 more. By now, it's late afternoon. The tub is still being used. The water has not been changed. You hesitate at the edge. There's no filtration system, no fresh supply running through. This is not a spring. This is a soup of skin cells, sweat hair, and oil. Floating strands of something unnameable drift near the corner. A slave gestures for you to get in. You do. The heat is immediate, as is the smell. Not foul, just human. Too human. A thick mix of old perfume, body grease, and damp stone. You find a spot between two strangers. Their knees touch yours. You try to ignore the sensation of something soft brushing against your thigh. Across from you, a man coughs, twice. His companion whispers, still sick. You look down at the water again. It's cloudy now, no longer reflective. Someone leans over and spits. You tell yourself it's not so bad, that it's warm, that it's relaxing. But then someone enters the tub after relieving himself. There was no rinsing, no soap, only a quick wipe with a cloth, which now floats next to you. And it hits you. This water has seen everything. Every foot sore, every rash, every slice from a strigil. Blood, pus, excrement. You see a child hop in with glee, splash about, and drink a mouthful. No one stops him. No one reacts. This is normal. You shift away, press your back against the cold stone wall of the tub. A slippery film coats the surface. You rub it off your shoulder, but it returns. Behind you, a slave tosses in more warm water from a bucket. The temperature rises, but not the cleanliness. You close your eyes, try to forget. But when you inhale, you realize this bath is not cleansing you. It's coating you, layer by layer, memory by memory. And when you finally stand to leave, you carry the residue of hundreds with you. And yet, this was one of the nicer baths. At least here the walls weren't crumbling. You notice something odd. A man across the room has a towel draped carefully over his shoulders, even inside the steam. He's not drying off. He's hiding. You watch as he avoids the eye of every attendant. When he moves, he's careful. Not slow from fatigue, but cautious, as if shielding parts of himself from view. You start to recognize the signs. The uneven gait. The subtle wince when steam hits his back. The faint crust near his collarbone. You've seen this before. A fungal infection. Maybe scabies, maybe worse. But he is here in this crowded, heated room because he must be. It's a gamble. You see, those with visible rashes, boils, or lesions are often barred from entering the main baths. For aesthetic reasons, not health. The illusion of cleanliness must be maintained. So what do? They hide. Layer oil over open sores. Dab perfume to mask the scent of infection. Wrap bandages beneath garments and pray no one looks too closely. They can't afford not to bathe. Not here, not in Rome. Skipping your routine at the baths could spark rumors, make you a target, unclean, untouchable. So instead, they fake it. Put on a performance of health while carrying disease beneath the skin. You think about the man beside you, stretching his arms. He's close, too close. And you wonder what's under that towel, but you say nothing. Everyone knows, no one talks. Because if we start drawing lines, asking questions, demanding proof, then anyone could be next. And no one wants to be the one told to leave. So the show goes on. Rashes are covered, boils ignored, and people keep entering the same water day after day pretending that everything is fine. You realize this man isn't being selfish. He's surviving. And in this city, that means lying even to yourself. And if you're starting to itch now, you're not alone. You hear a classroom chant in the distance, young voices repeating after their tutor, "A foul smell reflects a foul soul." Again and again, until the words are memorized like multiplication tables. You slip past the open doorway and glance inside. Children sit cross-legged on a cool stone floor. A teacher in a fine wool tunic walks between them, holding a sprig of myrtle. He waves it under their noses. "This is virtue," he says, "clean, pleasant, controlled." Then he lifts his arm, lets the scent fade, and frowns. But this, he gestures to the room, this could be corruption, decay. A man who neglects his soul, neglects his scent. You blink. They were not just teaching grammar and rhetoric here. They're teaching morality through musk. In Roman society, smell wasn't just biological. It was ideological. A good scent meant discipline, wealth status. A bad one, moral failure, laziness, even heresy. It was believed that a refined character would exude a refined fragrance, that the truly virtuous never stank. And so children were taught to fear their own bodies, to mask every trace of sweat, to carry sachets of herbs, to bathe, not just for comfort, but to prove they were good. You remember a saying carved into a villa wall? A clean scent wins trust. A foul one breeds betrayal. It wasn't metaphorical. If you smelled wrong, people assumed you thought wrong, acted wrong, might even commit a crime. Even court testimonies included references to scent. He reeked like the alley behind the fishmongers. One accusation reads, "Clearly a man without self-control." Imagine living in a world where your innocence could be debated based on your armpits. You look back at the classroom. A boy shifts awkwardly. He's sweating. The tutor notices. "Come," he says sharply, "step forward." The boy obeys. The class quiets. The tutor sniffs. His nose wrinkles. Whispers ripple through the room. Dirty, disrespectful, criminal. A single drop of sweat has turned this child into a suspect. You back away slowly, because now you're aware of your own scent, the oil on your arms, the faint heat beneath your tunic. You wonder what would they say about you. In Rome, cleanliness wasn't about soap. It was a moral currency, and if yours ran out, you weren't just smelly, you were shameful. And in a society obsessed with scent, even the air could betray you. Step into the atrium of a Roman villa. The light is perfect, filtered through sheer curtains, soft gold on marble. It's not just a home, it's a stage. And the lead actor, a Roman man, shirtless, glistening like a statue brought to life. His skin gleams shoulders, chest, even the tops of his feet slick with olive oil. Not rubbed in, not absorbed, just layered. Thick enough to catch the sunlight. Thick enough to show status. This wasn't just grooming. It was performance art. The shinier the skin, the more refined the man. Visitors would comment on it, servants would mirror it, even rivals would acknowledge it, if only with envy. A dry forearm, a matte knee, unforgivable. Oil was the Roman man's cologne, skincare routine, and virtue signal combined. You walk past a mirror. He's still there, adjusting a cuff, checking his reflection. He leans forward, inspects a patch behind his ear. It's dull. He clicks his tongue. A slave rushes in with a fresh vial of oil. Rose-scented, warm. The man spreads it down his spine with deliberate grace. He doesn't wince at the stickiness. He doesn't mind the heat, because discomfort is the price of dignity. And besides, oil doesn't just shine. It hides things, scars, bumps, infections. Layer enough of it, and even skin disease looks polished. That's the secret. In the Roman world, clean didn't always mean healthy. It meant controlled, curated, and shiny. So men wore oil like armor. They entered parties gleaming. They embraced each other, leaving handprints on shoulders. They danced with skin that squeaked. One poet described a lover's touch as slipping across a field of butter. It was supposed to be sensual, but also strategic, because the oiliest man in the room was probably the wealthiest, the most admired, the least questioned, even if he was also the most suffocated. See, under that slick sheen, his pores couldn't breathe. Skin infections festered, follicles clogged. Boils formed beneath the beauty. But no one talked about that. Not at the bathhouse, not at dinner, not at funerals. A man could die from blocked sweat, a fever brought on by fashion. But if he died shiny, he died respected. You stand in the corner of the room. You feel your own sweat, natural, bare, human. And in Rome, that's exactly what made you suspicious. Because in ancient Rome, you didn't need to be clean. You needed to look clean. Imagine this. You're standing in the frigidarium, the cold room of the Roman bath complex. You've just endured the strigil. A dull, bronze curve dragged across your skin, again and again by a focused young slave. Your back is raw. Your legs stung. Your chest numb from repetitive scraping. But you're not done yet. A patron approaches. He looks you over, and then he claps a hand against your shoulder. Clack. He nods, approval. That sound, that sharp smack of skin on skin. That's the mark of true cleanliness in Rome. If your skin makes no sound, it means you're still oily, still greasy, still dirty. But if it slaps, you've made it. You're clean. You're Roman. This was an actual test, a tradition. Passed through whispers and giggles and echoes in steam-filled chambers. Elite men would line up, slaves at their side. Each one polished to a shine, then clapped to confirm the result. Thwack, slap, clap. The bathhouse was a concert of percussion, flesh against flesh. And every note meant status. Some patrons even demanded a second round of strigil if their slap wasn't loud enough. Again they'd growl, "Make me clean." You'd hear it often. That desperation. Not for hygiene, but for the sound of being worthy. And if the slave failed, if the skin didn't sing, there could be punishment. A missed patch, a quiet arm, an unslapped thigh. All excuses for shame. Or worse. One historian described an account where a nobleman beat his slave with a sandal, not because he was still dirty, but because he didn't feel clean. In Rome, cleaning wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. It was ritual. It was performance measured by decibels. You try it, your palm against your own arm. Nothing, just a dull pat. Are you failing? A slave looks at you, raises the strigil again. You wince, but you nod, because here pain is the path to praise, and noise is the applause. In a society obsessed with surfaces, even silence was suspicious. The steam rises, the oil glistens, the walls echo with laughter, splashes, and whispers. But beneath all that, something colder churns. Because Roman bathhouses weren't just places to clean, they were places to calculate. Who you bathed with, where you sat, what time you arrived, none of it was random. You might think it's just steam and sweat, but it's politics. Let's say you walk into the caldarium. You spot Senator Vero. He's sitting near the center where the heat is strongest, the benches smoothest. Around him, allies, or maybe future enemies. You don't sit next to him. Not unless you've been invited. You choose the wrong spot, you signal ambition, or disrespect. That could cost you a favor, or a life. Now imagine a young official arrives, his name whispered in corners. Too eager, too bold. He steps into the steam and seats himself, right beside a general. Everyone notices. A few seconds of awkward silence. Then someone laughs. Not with him, at him. Later that night, he's found dead. Face down in the fountain outside. No proof, no accusations, just drowned. And rumor says he shouldn't have sat so close. Bathhouses had no private rooms, but they had invisible borders, unspoken rules. A freedman couldn't lounge near a magistrate. A slave couldn't be seen scrubbing the wrong master. Two senators of rival families, they'd never bathe at the same time. Unless something was being negotiated. Even emperors used the baths for strategy. Julius Caesar once bathed at a public bathhouse, not to clean, but to be seen. It was a power move, a reminder, I am one of you. But also, you are watching me. And they were, because in Rome, the bathhouse was a stage. But not everyone was acting. Some were watching, plotting, waiting. There are stories of poisoned oils, of assassins posing as masseurs, of slaves slipping blades into buckets of water. A man could walk in sweaty, greasy, and proud, and leave pale, silent, and dead. Because here status could be sharpened like a strigil, and power could be washed away. In the steam, everything was visible. And nothing was safe. You think you're just getting scrubbed. But the strigil doesn't stop. It scrapes again. And again, harder this time. Not just oil, not just dirt. It starts to take your skin. In ancient Rome, there was no such thing as too clean. The smoother the better, the redder the nobler. And some bathers wore their blood like a badge. Let's paint the picture. You're lying on a marble bench. A slave leans over you, holding a bronze strigil curved like a sickle. He scrapes your back, then your chest, then your thighs. The blade is dull but strong. Your skin isn't. At first, it tingles. Then, it stings. You flinch. He doesn't stop. He can't. You paid extra for the deep cleanse. And in Rome, pain was part of the package. A nearby bather turns his head. He sees the faint red streaks forming on your shoulder. He nods approvingly. You wince, but you smile, because this means you're someone. Even women weren't spared. Noble ladies would sit in private rooms while servants rubbed pumice, crushed shells, and limestone paste into their skin. It burned. It tore, but it whitened. And white was beauty. White was status. White was worth bleeding for. There were even records of men competing who could endure the most scraping, the harshest oils, the deepest peel. Some came out of the bathhouse with bandages. Others never walked out at all. A young poet once joked that a bather left more skin behind than sweat. He wasn't wrong. Infections were common. Cuts would fester in the humid air. A scratch from the strigil could turn into a fever within days. But still the scraping continued, because in the Roman mind, filth was weakness. Blood was proof you'd conquered it, even if it meant peeling yourself apart to prove you were whole. And so they scrubbed, until there was nothing left but pride and pain. You step inside the sudatorium. A wave of heat hits your face like a wall. Your breath shortens. Your skin begins to prickle. But there's no turning back now. The door shuts behind you. And you're not alone. Dozens, maybe 100 men crowd into this stone chamber. Shoulder to shoulder, thigh to thigh. Their bodies glisten with sweat and oil steam rising like mist from a battlefield. You can't see the back wall. You can't see the floor. You can barely see your own hands. The room is lit only by a single flame somewhere near the ceiling, barely visible through the haze. And the air, it's not air. It's something thicker. Each breath pulls in more heat than oxygen. Each inhale feels like swallowing boiled water. And yet you sit, because you must, because this is the Roman ideal of purifying heat. The final step of being clean. Sweat it all out, burn it all away. No one talks. They can't. Mouths are open just enough to survive. Chests heave. Some men press towels to their faces. Others crouch low, trying to find cooler air near the floor. The old man next to you sways, then slumps. He doesn't make a sound. No one moves. They've seen this before. Too many times. In winter, the baths fill faster. More people. More bodies. Less air. There are no vents, no exits, except the one door. And that door stays shut. Until the slave outside hears a knock. But inside, no one dares stand. Because to leave early is to admit weakness. To stagger out before your neighbor means you didn't cleanse deep enough. It's shameful. So they stay. Some fall asleep. Some pass out, and a few never get back up. There are records of entire groups fainting inside, 12 dead in one day scrawled in a bathhouse log. Another entry, carried out like fish. The Romans had a word for this kind of room, sudatorium. It means place of sweat, but you can't help but feel it's more like a slow oven, and you're the roast. Eventually, a hand knocks weakly on the wooden door. It creaks open, cool air rushes in, but not enough. For some, it's already too late. And the worst part, they called it a luxury, not a punishment, not a risk, just another step toward being clean. There's a stone plaque near one of the older bathhouses in Rome. Its inscription, still half legible, reads, "He ascended with the steam, cleansed and welcomed by the gods." It's not a joke. It's not satire. It's a eulogy. To die in the bathhouse wasn't always seen as a failure. Sometimes it was honored, because to die clean was to die worthy. In a city obsessed with appearances, death wasn't exempt. No one wanted to be remembered as the one who died filthy, covered in dirt, with sweat-stained robes and unshaven cheeks, so families brought their sick to the baths, even the dying. Slaves would carry men, barely able to speak, lower them into the tepidarium rub oil on limbs that had stopped moving, scrape skin already turning pale. Also, they'd look presentable. Some people chose it. They chose to die in the bathhouse. One senator reportedly asked his attendants to bring him to the caldarium, already feverish eyes clouded. He whispered, "Let the last thing I see be the steam." He didn't walk out. Others followed the same path. A retired soldier, an aging merchant, a woman of noble birth who asked to be surrounded by lavender oil as she passed. To modern ears it sounds horrifying, suffocating in heat, lungs tightening, dying not in a bed, but on a slippery stone floor among strangers. But to Romans, there was poetry in it. The body purged, the soul released, the steam rising like spirit ascending. Temples even held ceremonies for those who died pure. Offerings were made, incense was burned, and the stories grew. He died with clean skin and a calm heart. She passed with oil on her brow and peace in her breath. Even children weren't exempt. A marble carving near Ostia shows a boy holding a strigil. His eyes closed, head tilted upward. The plaque reads, "Young Marcus bathed for the last time." It sounds beautiful. Until you remember the floor was probably slick with other people's sweat, that the air was full of spores and old breath, that the same towel might have touched a dozen other bodies that day. But to Rome, none of that mattered. Not the germs, not the risk. Only the image, only the performance. And if that performance ended in death, well, at least it was a clean one. You survived COVID by washing your hands. In Rome, you might have died from being too clean. You were only supposed to stay 10 minutes, but you didn't want to leave. Not yet. The steam felt good. It melted your thoughts. The heat made you feel clean, like you were burning away yesterday's failures. So you stayed. Just 10 more minutes. But now, your heartbeat feels strange. Not fast, not slow, just wrong. Your ears start ringing. The room blurs at the edges. And before you can stand, before you can say anything, your knees buckle. You collapse. The last thing you hear isn't a scream. It's a murmur, a shuffle, a sigh, like someone watching rain hit a window. You're lying there, naked, burning, unable to move, and no one comes. Not the servant, not the man beside you, not the boy who saw you fall. They look at you, then look away. Because this happens all the time. In Rome, people faint in the baths. People die in the baths. It's not dramatic. It's not rare. It's routine. A slave does glance at you. For a moment, something flickers in his eyes, but then he turns. There are towels to fold, oil to pour, patrons to please. Your body is just part of the steam now. You don't remember being carried. You don't remember the door opening. You don't remember the sky. But here you are, outside, on the stone steps, naked, shivering. No one covered you. No one dressed you. Someone just needed your spot. So they dragged you out. That's all. Your body aches, not from illness, from shame. You curl into yourself. Not to stay warm, but to disappear. You force yourself up, one foot, then another. The ground cuts your soles, sharp stones, broken tiles. Your vision pulses. Your mouth is dry. You'd trade all the olive oil in Rome for one sip of water, but no one offers. You're not a bather anymore. You're a problem. You stumble through the alley. People avoid your eyes. Your legs shake. And somewhere, deep inside, you realize something terrifying. Being clean doesn't mean you'll survive. Not here, not now. That shine on your skin, it's not beauty anymore. It's a trap. The oil hasn't been wiped off. Your pores are clogged. Your body boiling from the inside. You lie down, on cold stone, your heart pounding in your ears. You try to breathe, but it hurts. Your head aches. Your vision spins. You whisper a prayer, but the gods don't answer. Only the fever does. When you die, no one cries. Your body is dragged out with quiet efficiency, like moving laundry, like clearing a broken vase. The slave who cleaned you folds your towel. He doesn't throw it away. He adds it back to the pile of clean towels. Ready for the next guest. The next shimmer of sweat. The next desperate desire to feel worthy. And so it begins again. You are gone, but the steam rises. The strigil scrapes, and Rome keeps bathing. You might think that was an accident, a rare tragedy, an exception to the elegant, tranquil image we've all seen. But no, that was the Roman bathhouse. Messy, brutal, loud, and far from relaxing. Let's step back and dismantle the myth. They told you the Roman baths were elegant, a place of marble walls, gentle mist, and soft conversation. Like a spa, a retreat. But they lied. The baths were chaos. The moment you walk in, you're swallowed by the noise, a roaring echo of voices bouncing off wet stone. Naked bodies shoulder past you, each coated in oil sweat or both. The air is thick, not just with heat, but with the smell of sour vinegar, old towels, and something vaguely biological. There is no music, no calm, just yelling, grunts, arguments over politics and soap. The floor is slick, a mix of water, oil, bits of hair, and sometimes blood. You tread carefully, but not carefully enough. You slip just slightly, your foot catching a patch of sludge. A slave nearby sees you stumble but doesn't help. He's too busy cleaning vomit from a cracked tile with what looks like a rag already soaked in something red. You pass a steam room. Inside, bodies packed shoulder to shoulder, dripping. The air doesn't circulate. It feels like you're inhaling someone else's breath. An old man slumps in the corner. No one moves to check on him. You assume he's asleep or passed out. People shout your name, not out of friendliness, but to ask what you're doing in that bath. You've crossed into a zone for a different social class. Apparently, even naked Rome had boundaries. A strigil scrapes someone's back. You hear the squelch of oil, and grime followed by a sharp yelp. You'll get used to it, someone says, laughing. Another man slips and hits his head. No one flinches. You begin to wonder what part of this was ever relaxing. Maybe the idea of the Roman bath was beautiful, in theory, but in practice, it was a slippery, loud, steaming pressure cooker of hierarchy, hygiene, theater, and collective body odor. It wasn't a spa. It was a wet arena, and most didn't walk out feeling clean, just lucky to still be standing. It looks like something from a surgery kit, curved, sharp, slightly rusted maybe. It's called a strigil, the Roman answer to body wash. There was no soap in Rome, not in the way we know it. So instead of lathering, you oiled up your skin, thick, sometimes rancid, olive oil mixed with sand or ash, and then scraped it all off with a strigil. Sounds clean, right until you feel it. The first drag across your shoulder feels like a metal kiss, then a bite, then a slow dragging peel. It doesn't just remove oil. It removes dead skin. And some live skin too, especially if the slave doing it doesn't know your pain tolerance or doesn't care. You flinch. He shrugs. There's still dirt in the pores. You try to move. He holds your arm steady. The strigil scrapes down your back like a rake through wet gravel. Your skin stings. Tiny red welts appear. You're not special. Everyone gets scraped. And that strigil, he used it on the last man. And the one before him. And probably the one who passed out on the floor an hour ago. No one washes it, just wipes it on a rag. Doctors in Rome didn't understand germs. But you can feel something enter your skin, a sting, a throb. Maybe it's just the heat, or maybe it's infection. You rub your arm the next day. It's red, sore, hot to the touch. You ask someone. They say good. That means it's working. Cleanliness in Rome wasn't about softness. It was about ritual. About appearing polished, even if you bled for it, even if you limped home, even if the next day your arm swelled like a loaf of overbaked bread. The strigil didn't cleanse. It punished, it performed, and everyone applauded the performance. Being clean in Rome didn't mean comfort. It meant pain, rawness, and the illusion of purity. We love to romanticize Roman hygiene. They were so ahead of their time, people say. Public baths, aqueducts, toilets. And yes, Rome had plumbing. They had running water. They even had sponge sticks. But here's the problem. None of it was actually hygienic. Because Roman hygiene was about appearance, not protection. Doctors didn't wash their hands. They didn't sterilize tools. They didn't even fully understand how diseases spread. If someone had a fever, it was blamed on imbalanced humors, not bacteria. If someone coughed blood, it was excess heat. If a wound turned green and oozed, that was the body expelling bad humors. No gloves, no masks, no antiseptic. Surgeons reused instruments between patients. Bandages were rinsed in cold water, or not at all. And where did many sick people go for relief? The bathhouse. Yes, the same crowded, slippery, oil-coated bathhouse you just collapsed in. Imagine that, you healthy, stepping into steam, filled with the breath of a man recovering from the plague. You scrape your skin with the same tool he used. You dry off with the same towel he bled on yesterday. But hey, At least you look clean. Even Roman toilets weren't safe. They flushed, yes, but they also backfired. Literally, gases built up in the sewer could erupt, blasting up from the latrine. Some people were burned, some died, from sitting down to do their business. But the marble walls were polished, and that's what mattered. Cleanliness in Rome was optical, not microbial. It was a show. You could be gleaming with oil powdered with crushed pearls and still rotting inside from an infected scrape or airborne illness. And no one would know, because as long as you didn't look sick, you were healthy. Roman hygiene wasn't ahead of its time. It was a marble-coated illusion designed to impress, not protect. Pliny the Elder was one of the most respected minds of ancient Rome, a writer, a naval commander, a natural philosopher, and the man who suggested rubbing roasted mouse ashes into your gums to cure a toothache. He meant well, but he also once recommended drinking goat urine to cure fevers and applying spider webs soaked in oil to infected wounds. His magnum opus Natural History is a sprawling encyclopedia of Roman knowledge, 37 volumes, thousands of remedies, and almost none of them safe. You have a sore throat? He suggests crushed pearls mixed with honey and vinegar. Have a rash? Try boiling lettuce in wine, then rubbing it on your skin, but only on an odd-numbered day. Pliny believed that if it came from the earth, it must be healing. So he recommended smearing fresh manure on wounds, drinking ashes of burned lizard for ulcers, inhaling the smoke of burnt dog fur for cough. And people listened, because science didn't exist yet, not as we know it. What passed for medicine in Rome was a mix of superstition, observation, and a dash of desperation. But make no mistake, following Pliny's advice could kill you. The irony, Pliny himself died from a medical miscalculation. He sailed too close to Mount Vesuvius during the eruption of 79 CE, convinced the sulfuric clouds would be therapeutic for his asthma. They weren't. He collapsed on the shore, choking. His cure became his coffin. And yet, long after his death, Romans continued to trust his writings, not because they worked, but because they were written. The weight of the scroll made the words feel true, so even as their skin blistered, even as infection spread, Romans followed Pliny, because sometimes believing you're healing is more comforting than knowing you're not. In ancient Rome, knowledge didn't need to be accurate. It just needed to sound ancient. You've seen it in the textbooks. A curious little object, a sponge tied to the end of a stick. The Romans called it a tersorium, their version of toilet paper, except it was communal. That's right, one stick, multiple users, one rinse bucket if you were lucky. You go to the latrine, you sit right next to someone else. There are no dividers, no privacy. You do your business, then reach for the tersorium. It's resting in a shallow bowl of vinegar or salty water. Not replaced, just soaked. You use it, you wipe, you place it back. Then the next person does the same, and the next, and the next. Sound gross it was. Medical historians now believe that shared tersoria spread dysentery, intestinal parasites, and E. coli-like infections. But to Romans, it was just what you did. No one washed their hands after. There was no soap, just a vague wipe on the tunic or a rinse at the fountain, if remembered. And think about where that sponge had been. Think about how porous it is, how hard it is to clean. Now imagine using it right after someone with an intestinal infection, in a place where disease spread faster than news. There's graffiti found near ancient latrines that jokes, "Beware the sponge, it bites twice." But no one really laughed. They couldn't afford to. Because if you were poor, you didn't have a private latrine. You had to share. You had to trust the sponge and hope the vinegar was enough. But vinegar doesn't kill viruses. It doesn't scrub out fecal matter. It doesn't erase contamination. So every time you used it, you gambled with your health, your gut, your life. The tersorium is often shown as a clever Roman invention. But in practice, it was a perfect storm of infection, shame, and shared disease. When you think of Roman baths today, what comes to mind? A serene stone courtyard, soft golden light filtering through columns, people lounging in silence, steam rising gently from calm pools, like a spa but ancient, elegant, historic, refined. Hollywood certainly thinks so. Movies show emperors reclining beside pools, noble women being massaged with oils, servants moving quietly, everything spotless and tasteful. Even travel brochures sell it. Walk through the majestic ruins of Roman baths, they say. Imagine the luxury of a bygone era. But here's the truth. They're selling a myth. The real Roman bathhouse was more like a crowded YMCA or a locker room after a football game, but louder, wetter, and somehow more dangerous. There were no candles, no privacy, no soft towels. Instead, floors slick with oil and filth, buckets of reused bathwater, men shouting across rooms, slaves scrubbing strangers raw, and diseases floating silently through the steam. Even the beautiful architecture, it echoed every sound, every grunt, every splash, every argument. And yet we've rebranded it. We call it ritual cleansing, civic wellness, communal luxury. But what it really was survival, with a hint of performance. Sure, some elites had private chambers. They paid for separate pools, quiet massage rooms, attendants with soft hands. But that wasn't the norm. That was the 1%. For the other 99%, it was overcrowded chaos. A place to show your face, get scraped, maybe pick up a fever, and hope you left in one piece. Modern media sells us the marble, not the man bleeding into it. It sells us the silence, not the coughing. It sells us the idea of being clean, not the cost it took to get there. The Roman bath wasn't a spa. It was a social stage, a disease hub, and a test of endurance dressed in warm water and wishful thinking. Why go through all this, the oil, the scraping, the burning, the communal sponge? It wasn't just for health. It was for status. In ancient Rome, being clean didn't mean you were free from germs. It meant you were above others. You could afford to oil your body daily. You could afford someone else to scrape your back. You had the time to linger in the caldarium and the money to leave wearing fresh perfume. Perfume mattered. So did shine. A gleaming forehead, a smooth chest, these were social signals. Your cleanliness said, I don't work in the fields. I don't smell like labor. I'm not like them. Even the tools told a story. A slave holding a strigil told the room, this man is important. A gold-plated oil flask whispered, I can waste luxury on skin. But here's the cruel part. The same slave who cleaned you, he didn't get to bathe. He wiped your sweat, then returned to quarters with none of the privileges. The poor were locked out of this cleanliness economy. Their homes had no running water. Their clothes absorbed the dust of the forum and the filth of the gutters. And if they ever dared enter a public bath out of turn, they risked ridicule. Or worse, infection without care. The elite, on the other hand, didn't bathe for hygiene. They bathed for theater, for hierarchy, for presentation, to step into a room and know I smell better than you. Cleanliness was never universal. It was curated, performed, and weaponized. It wasn't about not getting sick. It was about not looking like you were from the wrong street. In Rome, to be clean was to be visible. To be poor was to be ignored. And the bathhouse was never about health. It was about showing you didn't need to worry about it. From a distance, Rome gleamed. White marble temples, polished statues of gods and emperors. Bathhouses that echoed with the laughter of the elite. If you were standing far enough away on a postcard, say it might all look immaculate, divine even. But the moment you stepped closer, things changed. The marble wasn't smooth. It was slick, greasy from the residue of oil and ash. Footprints smudged across every surface layered in sweat and dust. The bathhouse floor, not clean. It was wet, slippery, and coated in a grime made from 1,000 bodies, and the air thick, with heat, with steam, with smells too complex to name. You thought it would feel refreshing. It didn't. Instead, you felt like you were being cooked alive in other people's sweat, because there was no soap, no running water, no sterile tools, just oil, rubbed onto skin, scraped off with a curved blade and thrown into the corner, over and over again. A ritual performed not to purify, but to impress, to appear clean. And that was Rome's greatest performance. It wasn't about hygiene. It wasn't about health. It was about spectacle, about status. Because if you smelled like rose oil, people assumed you were important. If your skin was hairless and glistening, people thought you were noble. If your teeth were white from goat urine, they assumed you were sophisticated. But no one asked what was underneath. No one questioned the infections, the burns, the broken skin. No one wanted to know what happened when the oils dried and the rot set in. You were a body on display, groomed, scraped, perfumed. And if you were lucky, you made it out alive. But many didn't. Some fainted in the heat, slipped on the floor, or bled from infections no one treated. Some simply collapsed their last breath, fogging up the same air everyone else inhaled. And yet, the ritual continued. Because Rome didn't solve problems, it masked them. With marble, with incense, with olive oil. And for a while, the illusion worked. Until you stepped too close and realized Rome wasn't clean. Rome just oiled over the problem. You thought a bath would make you feel better. That stepping into the caldarium, rubbing on the oil, letting a slave scrape you clean would somehow fix the ache in your chest, the fatigue in your legs, the nausea that's been building since yesterday. But now you're lying on a cracked stone bench outside the bathhouse. Your tunic sticks to your damp skin. Your head pounds. Your fingertips are numb. Someone tried to help you briefly. A stranger splashed water on your face. Then they moved on. Because what happened to you happens often. Heat stroke, infection, overexhaustion from hours spent steaming, scraping, and straining to look presentable. This wasn't some private retreat. It was a production line. And your body wasn't built to keep up. The water they used recycled. The sponge shared. The strigil probably had someone else's blood on it this morning. And the oil, it trapped everything. Dirt, sweat, disease. Like coating yourself in soft glue, then walking into a storm of germs. Your body is trying to tell you that this version of clean is dangerous, that the price of beauty is sickness, that in Rome, hygiene was an aesthetic, not a health measure. But there is no nurse, no medicine, no quiet room to recover. There is only the cold stone, and the realization that civilized doesn't always mean safe. You wonder how many others ended like this, with oil still on their skin, with no one to call their name, with the smell of lavender hiding the scent of something far worse underneath. In ancient Rome, you could die trying to look alive. You could rot while sparkling, and no one would notice until the next body needed your spot. The empire crumbled. Brick by brick, border by border, bathhouse by bathhouse. But one thing remained, the performance. Because Rome didn't just teach the world how to build aqueducts or write in Latin. It taught us how to look clean even when everything underneath was falling apart. When the Visigoths sacked the city in 410 CE, they didn't destroy that idea. They just inherited it. Later, medieval kings and queens copied the rituals, oils, powders, perfumes. Not because they worked, but because they looked like they worked. Public baths closed. Plagues arrived. But the illusion persisted. Better to smell sweet than to wash, some whispered during the Black Death. And they meant it, because centuries after Rome, people still believed in the mask of cleanliness. Not the science, not the sanitation, just the appearance. We traded strigils for scented handkerchiefs. We replaced shared sponges with powders and rouge. But the goal stayed the same. Don't stink like the poor. Don't look like you've suffered. Don't let anyone see the raw, real, unfiltered human beneath. Even now, in the age of running water, antibacterial soap, and 10-step skincare routines, we chase the same Roman ghost. Polished, presented, public-ready, we filter, we pose. We exfoliate, not always for health, but for the impression of health. Because Rome fell. But its obsession stayed. In our bathrooms, in our beauty ads, in our timelines. The empire is gone. But the mirror it held up to us, still there. Still whispering shine? Even if it kills you, you'd think we'd learn. After plagues, after centuries of medical advancement, after discovering bacteria, viruses, and what actually causes disease, you'd think we'd finally separate clean from looks clean. But we haven't, because walk into any luxury spa today. What do you see? Warm marble, candlelight, essential oils. Sound familiar? They've rebuilt the Roman bathhouse. Only now it's $300 a session. We still sweat in steam rooms, scrape our skin, slather on oil. Not for health, but for how it feels, how it looks, how it signals I take care of myself. But sometimes we're just repeating the same dangerous cycle, polishing the surface while ignoring what lies underneath. We detox with juice cleanses that starve the body. We bleach our teeth to the point of nerve damage. We over-sanitize, killing good bacteria along with the bad. And social media, it's our new bathhouse. We scrub our feeds, filter our faces, display curated rituals, but nobody sees the side effects. The burnout, the anxiety, the disconnection. Clean has become a performance again. We praise the glow, but not the rest. The result, but not the cost. Just like Rome. They thought oil meant purity. We think perfection means health. They died trying to shine. We burn out trying to sparkle. Different tools, same mistake. Rome isn't ancient history. It's a loop. A ritual we still walk through, one post one. Peel one pore strip at a time. You didn't need the oil. You didn't need the steam, or the scraping, or the rituals. What your body needed was rest, stillness, water, sleep. A quiet room, a soft blanket. Someone kind enough to say, you don't have to prove anything today. But Rome didn't offer that. It offered performance, production, buff. Even your exhaustion had to look good. If you were tired, you went to the bath. If you were sick, you got scraped. If you were aching, you were expected to show up glowing. And now, centuries later, we do the same. We treat burnout with serums. We answer anxiety with affirmations pasted over sunrise reels. We keep moving, smiling, posting. But inside, still tired, still hurting, still craving something softer than oil and praise. Because sometimes what you need isn't to shine. It's to disappear for a bit, to unplug, to close your eyes, to fall asleep without performance, to be a person, not a statue. And maybe that's the quiet lesson hidden beneath all of Rome's marble, that being clean isn't the same as being well, that being seen isn't the same as being loved, that rest deep, real rest might be the most radical act of all. So tonight, don't reach for the oil, don't chase the glow, just let yourself be, messy, human, exhausted, and worthy of rest. Close your eyes. You're not in the caldarium. You're not lying on a stone slab. You're not surrounded by strangers, heat, or pressure. You're not in Rome anymore. You're here, now. Safe, warm. There's no slave holding a strigil. No oil to scrape off your skin. No eyes judging whether you look clean enough. There's just breath, yours. Slow and steady. Rising, falling. No marble walls. Just the softness of a blanket. The quiet hush of the room. The small comfort of a pillow that knows the shape of you. You don't have to shine. You don't have to be polished, or presentable, or perfect. You just have to rest. Whatever the day took from you, you don't have to carry it here. Not tonight. Let the weight slide off your shoulders. Let your jaw loosen. Let your toes curl softly under the sheets. No more steam, no more masks, no more rituals that drain more than they heal. Just you. Breathing, existing, safe. You've crossed oceans of time to arrive at this moment. And now, you can simply be. The empire is gone. The expectations are gone. And you're still here, whole, gentle, alive. Let it fade now. The noise, the footsteps, the steam. Let the marble walls dissolve into shadow. Let the echo of voices blur into silence. Let the scent of oil slip away with your next breath out. That was then. This is now. And now, there's only this, the quiet hum of the present. The weight of a blanket pulling you gently toward the earth. The rhythm of your own breath, steady as a lullaby. No more questions. No more trying. You've heard the stories. You've walked the halls. You've felt the weight of an empire that asked too much of its people. But not anymore. No one needs you to sparkle here. No one's watching. No one's keeping score. So let the bathhouse disappear behind you. Let it melt like fog in morning light. Let the pressure lift from your chest. Let the ghosts of Rome rest in peace. And you let yourself rest too. You've done enough. You've seen enough. You've carried enough. This moment is yours. The world can wait. Sleep isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's safety. It's a return. No oil, no perfume, no strigil scraping your back under flickering torchlight. Just your skin. Bare, honest, free. Just your breath. Calm, gentle, yours. No audience, no empire. No one asking you to shine. Just sleep. The kind that doesn't need rituals, or steam, or scented oils. The kind that comes when your body finally feels safe. You're not in a chamber built for status. You're not in a room filled with whispers and eyes. You're here, in your own quiet corner of the world, wrapped in warmth, tucked into stillness. And as your thoughts begin to soften, as the edges of memory blur, as your breath deepens into that familiar rhythm, you remember you don't need to be impressive to be loved. You don't need to be polished to be seen. You don't need to perform to belong. You can simply rest, not like a Roman, not like a statue, not like something meant to be admired, but like a human, soft, messy, alive. So tonight, let sleep take you. Not scrubbed, not oiled, just real. Just you. You've made it through the bathhouse. You've made it through the stories. And now it's time to let go. Close your eyes, rest your body, and drift. Good night, friend. You're home. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and drift with us again soon.